Good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, January 23rd, 2025. It is now 5:30 p.m. and I will call the Salem Area Mass Transit District Board of Directors meeting to order. And we'll go ahead and get started by having our clerk of the board note attendance for a quorum. And I will just publicly state that Director Carney is online, and Director Duncan should be joining us shortly. And so we'll have a full board. And I'll pass it over now to General Manager Pollock.
Thank you. In lieu of a safety minute this evening, I do have a statement I'd like to read based on our unfortunate incident from yesterday. I'd like to take a moment to address this distressing incident that occurred yesterday afternoon involving Cherriots that resulted in the loss of a community member's life. Our hearts are heavy as we think of Mr. Chandler and his loved ones. During this difficult time, our thoughts are with his family, friends, and all who knew him as a neighbor and member of our Salem community. Our thoughts also go to our transit operator who was involved in this tragic incident. I talked with him earlier today, and he's doing better, but is working through the healing process. We are ensuring that appropriate support resources are available to him during this challenging time. We recognize the profound impact this incident has on many people, including the riders who were present, emergency responders who arrived at the scene, and members of the public who may have witnessed this tragic event, as well as our fellow employees who so often face consequences of immediate action every day. We want to acknowledge the Salem Police Department and other emergency responder personnel who came quickly to the scene, as well as the individuals who attempted to render immediate assistance. Their swift response exemplifies the caring spirit of our community. Moving forward, we will maintain our focus on our essential role of providing transportation services to our community while keeping safety at the forefront of everything we do. We understand many may have questions, and we are committed to maintaining open communication with our board and the public while we respect the ongoing investigation process. Thank you for allowing me to address this matter.
Thank you. So, thank you very much, General Manager Pollock, for making sure to note that at the top of the agenda. It is really hard for everyone involved. And it's also hard now to pivot to the rest of the board meeting. So I will try and do that as gracefully as I can. So we'll move right into our presentations. So we've got our customer satisfaction and community value survey, and General Manager Pollock.
Thank you. I'll ask our Chief Communications Officer to please make the introductions.
Good evening, President Pressy and members of the board. Tonight I have the honor of introducing Mr. Christopher Tatham, ETC's Institute's CEO. As an international authority on survey research, Mr. Tatham has designed, administered, and conducted data analysis for more than 2,000 statistically valid surveys involving more than 3 million people on 4 continents during the past 30 years. This evening, he will share with you the results of the 4th Waves surveys for customer satisfaction and community value. Mr. Tatham, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you tonight. I'm sorry about the somber events that have taken place, but I'm going to proceed with sharing some of the results of our most recent surveys that we've conducted for you. If you're not familiar with ETC Institute, as the introduction said, we do work all over the world. We actually our clients include over 1,200 local communities, cities, counties, transit agencies. We actually work for 29 of the 35 largest transit systems in the United States. So as we go through the presentation, I'm going to share some of my commentary will be in the context of how you stack up to some of the other agencies that we conduct surveys for. We actually maintain national benchmarks for performance, both with regard to community perceptions of transit agencies and also rider perceptions of service delivery and so forth. So with that, I'm going to kind of just walk through what I consider to be the highlights. There's a lot of slides here. I'm going to try to get through them fairly quickly, but I'll summarize things before I even read the bullets. I presented to you a year ago, and I told you that you were one of the best transit agencies for whom I've delivered surveys. I did not expect your ratings to improve because they were so high a year ago. but I'm coming back a year later and telling you again, you're one of the best transit agencies for which I've delivered survey results, and you've actually gotten even better from a year ago. Some of the big things I took away from this before I get into the details are first, most residents of the Salem area think Cherriots provides value to the community. That includes your Lyft customers, almost all of them, 96%, 92% of your bus customers, and nearly 9 out of 10 of the community members who were surveyed. In addition, as I mentioned up front, you're setting the standard for service delivery for transit agencies across the country. You actually rate above the national area in all areas, and you improved pretty much across the board from last year's very, very high results. In addition, we found that Chariot customers would like funding for Cherriots to increase over the next 5 years. I think there's a lot of perceived value in what you currently provide, and your customers think you can do even better if you had more resources. But with that said, there's some opportunities for improvement, which I'm going to highlight. And then most important, when we looked at what do residents, they wanted to have Cherriots take them to a lot of places they need to go. So, and that's certainly a positive view of the organization. Again, it's both your customers who use your service and then people just in the community, many of whom do not. What I'm going to do tonight is walk you through the two major categories of surveys we did. The first was of customers. We surveyed both riders of your bus service and also your Lyft riders. As part of that, I'm going to show you some comparisons to national averages and also identify some opportunities of improvement and give you your net promoter score. And then in the second half of my presentation, I'm going to share what we found from the community value survey, and then I'll summarize, and certainly if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. So let me start off with the customer satisfaction survey. We did two surveys. The first was of your bus customers, and it was administered last November between November 4th and November 12th. We actually had teams that rode the buses, and we basically wanted to make sure that all people on those buses we surveyed had an opportunity to participate in the survey. So we actually staffed our team with Spanish speakers. About half of our staff actually were fluent in Spanish because we wanted to make sure people who didn't speak English were well represented. Our goal was to get 400 surveys, and we actually achieved that. And it was mixed over weekday and weekend service, so that at the end of the day, the sample we surveyed was representative with regard to the overall system in proportion to the ridership on each route. It's not perfect, but given a sample of this size, it has an accuracy of about plus or minus 4.9% at the 95% confidence level. And that just means if we did the survey 100 times, we should get these same results within about 5% or less, 95 times out of 100. With regard to the Lyft Paratransit survey, it was also conducted last November. For this one, we actually did a combination of mail out. We then followed up with text and email. It was also available in both English and Spanish, and our goal for this survey was achieved with at least 200 completed surveys. With regard to what we found from the survey is first, your ridership is very diverse. One of the things that we took a look at is first the composition by gender. You'll see it's 51% male, 49% female. Nationally, we're typically seeing even higher percentages of male compared to female. So you have more balance than we're seeing in other systems. You also have riders of all ages. You can even see you have a 16% are over 50, but you do have a lot of folks, 45% of your bus customers are under age 30. When we looked at the racial and ethnic composition of people who were surveyed, you can see about 1 in 4 were Hispanic, 1 in 10 were Black or African American. You can see we had Asians, American Indians, and Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders all represented. And when we asked people whether or not they spoke a language other than English at home, you can see almost a third said yes, and the majority of those, 76%, actually reported they spoke Spanish. So it was good that we had bilingual interviewers on most of the routes while we were doing the surveys. In addition, it wasn't a surprise. Household income tends to be lower. You can see half the respondents reported annual household incomes under $25,000 per year. But those people who are using it very frequently. And you'll notice here that 5 days or more per week of usage was almost 6 in 10. And you can see another 28% are using services at least 3 to 4 days a week. So when you look at that, you've got more than 3/4 of your users using the service at least 3 to 4 times a week, which is high usage. In addition, you've retained your customers. A lot of transit agencies will have people start using it because they don't have their car. And then once they get their car fixed, they stop riding. But you'll see that you've got a third of your customers have actually been riding for more than 5 years. But you also have, you're attracting new customers where 22% indicated they started riding in the last year. So again, a lot of diversity in the types of people with regard to income, race, and other factors. And so we thought that was encouraging that you're serving all types of people in the community. Second thing that we found is that Cherriots is perceived to be very important to the region's economy. And you might wonder, well, where do you find that? Where does that come from? Is you'll notice that even though the income is generally lower among your current bus riders, you'll notice that work is the number one reason they're using it. So without transit services, without Chariot service, 6 out of 10 of your riders wouldn't be able to get to work. And they're doing a lot of those jobs that are lower paying that community businesses actually need. You can see 17% are going for educational purposes, and then you can kind of see the descending order of shopping and errands, healthcare, and other factors. But when you look at one of the things that we noticed in the survey as we were looking at it is bus routes allow folks to get to employment. And you'll notice when we asked them a question as to whether they agreed or disagreed with that statement, 75% of the people surveyed, 40% of whom strongly agreed that the bus routes you currently provide make them have better access to employment. So again, without Cherriots, many residents wouldn't be able to get to work or school, and that's one of the big services that you're providing. In addition, we found that of the people who are using Chariot services, one of the things that we asked them is, are you dependent on Cherriots buses to travel to and from your destination? You can see a high percentage of people were, 91%, just 9% said no. And because of that, without Chariot services, as I indicated before, you'd have a high percentage of people who are using Cherriots who would not be able to get to work or school. 27% of the people indicated they ride for convenience. These are some of the other reasons, and 26% of the people who aren't dependent ride actually to save money. Some of the other things that we look for in the bus survey of your bus customers is we found that most of your customers would like to see funding for Chariot increase. And that's not a real surprise. We typically see users of transit service want to have funding increased, but it was just the intensity of the agreement that I found somewhat surprising. We found when asked both of your bus service, which is on the left, and the Lyft service on the right, you had 82% of your bus riders, 51% strongly agreed with that. And you can see similarly when it comes to Lyft service, we had 40% strongly agree, and another 27% for a total of 2/3 of your list customers actually want to see funding for Chariot services increase over the next 5 years. With regard to your performance and how you stack up to other communities, I'm going to show you several slides. And for each of these slides, I'm going to show you, or at least for most of them, your 2024 survey results, which will be at the top, the 2023 results, which will be right below that, and then the national average. When I presented last year, I shared the 2023 results, and you can see they were substantially higher than the national average. This is the overall satisfaction rating. You can see that now it's 28% above the national average. You're combined 86% compared to the national average of just 58%. In addition, you have almost none of your customers who are dissatisfied, or you can see it's very low compared to almost 1 out of 6 or 1 out of 5 of most transit agency. So your performance is good. It actually got even better compared to a year ago overall. In addition, when we looked at some of the things related to Lyft service, you can see that of your Lyft customers, 92% were satisfied, just 2% were dissatisfied. And that's up significantly from a year ago, particularly when you look at the percentage of people using Lyft services that were giving your most intense positive rating very satisfied. It went from 52 to 61. And so again, a lot of good things that we're finding. In addition, when we asked Lyft customers, you can see that 71% strongly agreed and 25% agreed that Cherriots provides value to the community. Just 2% disagreed with that. And although these are very high ratings, and we typically see high ratings among Lyft customers or paratransit customers across the country, your ratings are substantially better than we generally see in other areas. In addition, I was really impressed with your customer service ratings. You got to remember, we had several hundred people complete the survey, and we asked them when contacting Cherriots customer service, were their concerns addressed promptly? nobody disagreed with that statement. And you can see that 93% gave positive ratings. In addition, when we asked how to rate customer service representatives being helpful and courteous, you can see again, no one gave a negative rating and 94% gave positive ratings. And just try to put that in perspective. Most people, when they call or they need something, oftentimes have a problem or a question that they can't figure out themselves. And to have such a high percent of positive ratings is something you should be very, very proud of. And it really says a lot about the quality of employees you have who are interfacing with your customers when they have contact. When we look at some of the national averages for some of these items, when it comes to perceptions of safety when using or riding the bus, you can see nationally it's just 42% give positive ratings. Cherriots was 83 last year, 84 this year, which is 42% above the national average. People feeling safe and secure while waiting for their buses. Nationally, it's just a little over 1 in 3 at 35%. And you've actually saw your results go from 69% last year to 73% this year, which is now 38% above the national average. And you can see even when it comes to things, for example, the perception of the bus being clean, you can see nationally is just 38%, and you've gone from 77 to 79%. So again, perceptions of safety, cleanliness, those are very, very high compared to national averages. In addition, we looked at some of the things related to just the ability for buses to get people to their destinations in a reasonable time. It's about 6 in 10 nationally. Last year it was at 85. We saw an increase from that to 89 this year. The perception that your buses run on time is less than half nationally, or more than 3/4. Last year at 79, now 78, which is still 30 points above the national average. And when it comes to frequency of service, in other words, how often buses come by stops, nationally it's about 6 in 10. And you can see you were at 73% last year, 76% this year, which is again 19% above the national average. So lots and lots of good things. And you may sound like a broken record, but it's going to continue. One of the things that we looked at is whether or not your customers think bus routes are conveniently located for them. Nationally, it's a little over half. And you can see this year it actually went from 78 to 84%, which was a 6% improvement, and now 32% above the national average. Even things like price, which nationally is 62%, you went down just a little bit, but you're still 18 points above the national average. And the buses operate basically when people need them is 15% above the national average at 77 compared to 62. So as I go through these, it just is the same kind of thing over and over, which again, I think you have a lot to be proud of and really shows your system and your services are meeting customer expectations. Here's a few more. It comes with information about people, your customers being able to understand your routes and being confident navigating the system. You're at 35%. I mean, just a phenomenal difference at 90% compared to the national average of 55. And look at that, an 8% increase just in the last year. When I presented last year, thought your results were good, doing even better. The perceived ease of getting information about services and schedules is 24% above the national average and has improved 5% over the past year. And the perception that it's easy to find out if buses are running on time went down 1%, but really not a statistically significant change. And that's 15% above the national average. And just continuing with some of the perceptions of your drivers, I think this shows that your customers think a lot of your drivers. First, when it comes to perception of drivers operating vehicles safely, nationally it's at 73. You're at 87, which is 14%. Stayed the same from last year. The general knowledge of your bus drivers about the system actually improved 4 percentage points. And you can see is now 20% about what we see above nationally. And bus drivers being helpful and courteous, you can see that's 19% above the national average, improved another 3% from last year. So lots and lots of good things. We don't have benchmarks for everything, but we did ask a few other questions, such as, is there enough seating and space on the bus? We saw that go up 2% from 80 to 82. And the perceptions that your shelters and stops are maintained, well maintained, that actually went up 6% from 68 to 74. So with regard to some of the questions related to lift services, you can see we asked people whether or not the vehicles usually pick them up within 30 minutes of within the scheduled 30-minute pickup window. You can see 91% agreed with that statement. And you can see over 50% actually gave you a strongly agree. And you can see that was up from 2023, where it went from 46 to 54. And you can see the somewhat or the agree stayed about the same, but the intense positives improved. And then just the overall view of Cherriots employees, you got 2 out of 3 customers, both last year and this year, giving a strongly agree rating. Overall, 95% view your employees favorably, and barely a percent had concerns. So again, I think your employees are doing a great job, and they're one of the reasons your customers are so satisfied. And we asked customers overall how satisfied are they with the performance of Cherriots customer service staff. You can see a whopping 91% gave positive ratings. And put this in perspective, you're probably most likely going to hear from people who complain. For every person that complains about customer service, the 3%, there's 20, almost 22 people who are very satisfied. And so sometimes you may not hear from the very satisfied customers, because sometimes the people who are negative tend to be more vocal. But next time you hear a complaint, remember there's 22 people out there for every one complaint that thinks very positively of your Cherriots customer service staff when they're list customers. So last thing is just, what are your opportunities for improvement? When your ratings are this high, the truth is there's not a lot you can do better. A lot of it's trying to make sure you know what's important so you can keep doing a lot of the things you're doing well. But one of the things that we ask people, in addition to having them rate their satisfaction with various services, we also ask them to rank the top or most important services. And you can see buses running on time. These are for your bus customers. Buses being clean and having people feel safe on bus are the top 3. And those, frankly, didn't change. They were the same top 3 priorities last year. And one of the tools that we use to help identify opportunities for improvement is we actually plot all of the areas or attributes you can see here that are listed. We plot them on the matrix from left to right. The things on the right side are generally more important. The ones on the left are less important. And then as you go from the bottom to top, the things on the top tend to be things that are rated better. Things on the bottom half are rated lower. And what you'll notice is we have what's called the circle of equilibrium. That means you basically are where you need to be. And there's only one item that's outside that circle, and that's buses running on time. That's just so important to your customers. You're doing well in that area, but it's one of those things you don't want to make mistakes in or fall backwards in. So we'd encourage you to continue emphasizing that, along with these other items that are highlighted just because of their high level of importance, making sure buses stay clean, continuing to emphasize safety and security for people who, when they're waiting for their buses, making sure buses operate at times that customers need them, and ensuring the frequency of service continues to remain high, at least meeting the customer expectations as it is. So in other words, a lot of it is just continue what you're doing and understanding that those areas are things that'll probably have the most, if you don't do well in those, you potentially might see your results go down. It's unlikely, I said this last year, so you might surprise me again next year, to really see ratings any higher than you've already achieved once you start getting into the 90 percentile of customer satisfaction ratings, but maybe you'll surprise me next time you do the survey. Last thing I might share is just your Net Promoter Score. If you're not familiar with the Net Promoter Score, it's used at least by industry, used by a number of transit agencies, really to take a look at would people recommend the services that they're using to others. And the idea is people become the people who get other people to use the service. And so people who give 9s and 10s are classified as promoters. People who give negative ratings or even mid-level ratings from 0 to 6 are considered distractors. Then we have what are called passives in between. And you'll notice that Cherriots, your Net Promoter Score for your bus customers is actually 56, and that's based on your 65% promoters less than 9% distractors. Nationally, the Net Promoter Score for most transit agencies is actually negative. In other words, they don't have nearly as many people giving 9s and 10s, and they have a lot more detractors. And so congratulations, your rating comparatively is just incredible. It's 77 points above the national average. And when it comes to your Lyft customers, we don't have a national average for this, but you can see 78% of your customers are promoted. It's actually a little higher than last year. Your detractors actually went down from 10 to 9, and your net promoter score among your Lyft customers is a whopping 69, which is incredible. And so anyway, again, congratulations on your customer service ratings for both your Lyft and for your bus customers. I might shift gears here now to the other survey that we focused on, and that was really to get feedback from the community. We call it a community value survey, just to get a perception of how many people in the community are really using the service, how many people know about it, and what do they think about Chariot services, even if they're not using it. This survey was administered in November and December. It's done using address-based random sampling. We initially do a mail out to households. We then follow up with phone, email, text, and we even use targeted social media ads to maximize participation in the survey. It was provided in multiple languages, and our goal was to get 400 completed surveys. We ended up with 412, and similar to the satisfaction or the margin of error for the bus survey, this margin of error was plus or minus 4% or 4.9% at the 95% level of confidence. So again, a very good sample. Some of the things that we found from this survey is first, awareness of Cherriots is extremely high. You can see that 99% of the people that responded to the survey indicated they knew Cherriots as the public transportation provider in the Salem region. That was actually up 1% from last year when it was 98%. In addition, we asked people whether or not they use Chariot service, and we don't expect this to be a high percentage. You can see just 3% of the people we surveyed said they use it 5 times or more a week. Another 6% said they use it 2 to 4 times a week. So about 9% are interacting with you at least once a week. And you can see 35% have never used Chariot service, and another 32% perhaps had used it at one time but are no longer using it. And most of those folks had various reasons, many of which were they were able to drive again or they got a car, things like that. In fact, this next chart shows some of the reasons that people stopped using services or have not used service in the past. And you can see it takes too long to complete a trip, particularly compared by car. They were no longer employed, so they stopped using it to go to their work, or the stops weren't near their home. These are some of the reasons that people who formerly used ended up not using the service anymore. But most of them, you can see even the write-in answers that we received for the other were people who stopped once they purchased or had a working car again. With regard to how the results for the community at large stack up nationally, we have several questions that are really just a perception of the value that Cherriots provides. The first one is, Cherriots a valuable part of the community? Nationally, about 2 out of 3 people think that their local transit agency is valuable. But in the Salem area, it's 85%, significantly above, 18% above the national average. And you can see it's the same level it was a year ago. And then even when we ask people, is Cherriots valuable to you personally, even though about a third or a little over the third have never used it, we still have 46% of the people who responded seeing it as a value to them personally, compared to nationally being 30%. When it comes to things such as the ability for Cherriots to provide transportation options for people with special mobility needs, you increased from 90 to 91% this year, which is now 10% above the national average. And when we ask whether or not Cherriots provides affordable transportation options, that was actually up 7% from a year ago. And you can see nationally is slightly ahead of the national average of 76%. Some of the other things that we looked at is whether or not people think Cherriots help provides job opportunities in the region. And you can see that's 25% above the national average at 51. You're currently at 76%. And that's real consistent with the data we saw from the rider survey, where the number one reason your riders are using it is to get to and from work. And you can see when it comes to perceptions that Cherriots improves the quality of life in the community, also significantly above the national average at 74%, compared to 56% nationally. Some of the other things we looked at is whether or not people think Cherriots helps reduce pollution and help the environment. You can see that's at 72% now, which was above the 68% a year ago. And you can see is significantly above the national average of 59%. When it comes to whether or not Cherriots helps reduce traffic congestion, has stayed the same, slightly above the national average at 63 compared to 57. And then the perception that Cherriots makes roads safer for all users you can see remain the same at 58%, which is 10% above the national average. In addition, when we ask people things like whether or not Chariot allows people to get to schools and universities, that actually improved 5% compared to a year ago from 85 to 90, which is now 19% above the national average. Perceptions of Cherriots helping people get to jobs also improved 5% from 84 to 89, which is significantly above the national average of 70. Allowing and helping people get to medical facilities, you can see stayed steady at 86%, which 7% above the national average, and even allowing people to get to parks and entertainment areas, you can see that was up 6% compared to a year ago and is significantly above the national average of 59%. Some of the other questions we asked that we don't have in our national survey that we can at least track trends are is just perceptions about, does Cherriots provide access to the region and adjacent cities? That's actually improved 9% compared to a year ago. Perceptions that you support community businesses was up 3%. Perceptions that you provide opportunities for locating affordable housing was up 5%. And overall perceptions that you manage financial resources well was about the same. It was down 1%, but this change was not statistically significant. In addition, we asked people a number of things based on their agreement with various statements about whether Cherriot provides transportation options to people with special mobility needs, getting people to schools and universities. These are the items that I just shared with you. And you can see pretty much across the board, community members felt that Cherriots provides access to pretty much all the important destinations in the region. In addition, when we asked people what things were really most important for Cherriots to focus on, getting people to jobs was at the top of the list. You can see that was followed by providing transportation options for people with special mobility needs at 39%, and then Cherriots providing affordable transportation options kind of rounded out the top three issues that people felt that Cherriots should be focused on moving forward. And in that same analysis I showed you for your customers, we do the same thing. We kind of rate from left to right the overall importance of these items that you see listed here from A down to P, and then we plotted them vertically based on their overall satisfaction ratings. And you can see most of the items are inside the circle, which is good. But then when you look, kind of if you were to draw a line through all these, it would go from the bottom left to the top right. And that's good because that means that the things are really the most important to focus on, you're actually doing the best at. And you can see those items are A, B, and C, allowing people to get to jobs, making sure that people who have special mobility needs are given transportation options, and providing affordable transportation options. Those are the three things that people care the most about. And those are three of the areas that you're getting highest ratings. Areas that you got slightly lower ratings that are in the box in the bottom left, you can see are in providing opportunities for locating affordable housing. That's not as important to people, but it rated slightly lower, and managing financial resources well. Sometimes that can be addressed just with communication and other items. There wasn't a lot of negativity to that question. There were just a lot of people who fell into a neutral or okay response because they did not know. Also, when we asked the community what they thought was perhaps needed or the top priorities to enhance, you see more frequent service was number one, serving more routes to serve places that people wanted to go, and enhancing shelters at transit stops rounded out the top three features and amenities that Cherriots could add that people thought would provide value to the community. Last thing I'll share on this is the Net Promoter Score for the community. And I can tell you that this is typically because most people are not transit users. They're not going to recommend it to their family because many of them don't even know. So you'll notice the net national average for the Net Promoter Score is actually negative 62 because there typically aren't a lot of promoters and there's typically quite a few detractors. But you'll notice here when it comes to promoters, that increased from 37 to 39. In your detractors, these aren't all negative. You didn't have a lot of zeros or ones, but you had fives and sixes, which are in the middle. And that was about 40 this year, which was down slightly from last year. But overall, your Net Promoter Score is -1, which may not mean a lot to you, but it's 61 points higher than the national average when it comes to the community, which is really, really tremendous. Oh, I know I've been talking for a while and gone through 3 surveys and a lot of data. When all is said and done, my big takeaways are listed here. I think both your customers and the community really think Cherriots is providing great value to the community. You're setting the standard for service delivery. And I don't just mean you're setting it by little ways. you're generally one of the best performing transit agencies in the country. And this may be the best report that I've given, at least in the past year. It certainly is. There are opportunities to do better, but most of those are to focus on what you're already doing well and just continuing to do it and paying attention to the things that were really important to both your customers and communities. And one of which is making sure that people can go to the places that they need to go. And finally, the overall perceptions for funding, particularly among your customers, are very strong. And I think that shows that they have a lot of confidence in the way you invest the resources so that your customers can get to point A and point B, most of whom are trying to get to and from work or school as their number one reason for using the services. So with that, I'm going to pause and just share this last slide. We actually have this information available online on a dashboard. So you can actually go online and drill down into the data and do your own queries. That's actually available, and we've updated it from last year's survey. So I'll pause there. I don't know if there's any questions, but I'd certainly be happy to answer them if there are.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions from the board? Director Navarro?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Presi. Thank you so much for that presentation. I think that it captures the value that that the community believes that we have here at Cherriots. In reviewing some of the questions that were asked, I noticed that we had one that said, people stopped riding because of bus routes not being conveniently located for them. And I wonder if, how do I word this? So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to ask a question about how many people are, who are riding are walking a further distance to be able to reach a bus stop that has accommodations that are comfortable for them. There was, another a point of information there that said that 30% of riders want shelters at transit stops. So I'm wondering if the bus stops not being conveniently located could have shelters, or is that something, accommodations that we could be providing? And if the riders right now are having to walk an extra quarter mile, half mile to be able to reach a stop that does have that, is there an opportunity to capture that information, or has that been captured and we're just not seeing it?
Yeah, it's hard to look from this survey. We probably have to drill down a little bit more. One thing we did ask some of the customers is whether they'd be willing to participate in perhaps a short follow-up survey. So there might be opportunities to do some follow-up with people based on the responses. But from this survey, we didn't ask it that way, so it's really hard to infer, what you're looking for from the results. But that kind of question and research certainly could be done. This survey just doesn't do it.
Okay, thank you.
I'm wondering if maybe I missed it, but we asked where people go, and predominantly was jobs. But then, at the end of the presentation, we talked about some of the things that we should work on is more frequent service, more routes to serve places I need to go. Did we ask where people need to go or want to go other than just jobs?
Not specifically. There is some write-in information that we got, some places where people are traveling to and from. We actually did an origin and destination survey of your current customers last year that has some of that data. But this survey, again, didn't get into that level of detail. So it's more of a measurement to kind of an annual survey to kind of check your health, but it doesn't drill down into some of those details. But that may be something you want to look at in the future, but we don't have that kind of detail from this survey.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it would be nice to know where people want to go that they can't get to right now.
Yeah, and I think we'll be able to capture that in other activities, especially this coming year. COA, actually, too. I have that note also is, okay, where do people want to go that we're not serving?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much. Oh, wait.
Thank you very much.
I have a comment more than anything. Thank you, first of all, for the presentation. Thank you so much. But also, I just want to say a huge thank you to Cherriots staff. This is massively reflective on the work that you guys do. So just a huge thank you. And then also to the community, I think I mean, I'm not under any illusions to think that we provide like the best service in the entire country or anything like that. But the fact that the community appreciates the work that we do so much and really does like the service that we are able to provide with what we have is just, I think, says a lot about the Salem Kaiser community. So I just want to say thank you to our writers very much for them valuing the services that we offer, and we will continue to try to raise the bar.
Okay, thank you. All right, so this will bring us to our public comment portion of our agenda. We do have one person that signed up. Go ahead, come up, Josiah.
Yes, sir. I have something to say about something I don't understand.
Okay, just make sure that the mic's on, right? Okay, and just speak into the microphone.
Just making sure.
Okay,
I'm just making sure.
yep, go ahead.
On page 49, which we'll get to eventually, I don't understand what this mobility reimagined means. And I don't understand what this is about, which we'll get to that eventually. But first, I just want to say thank you to those that tried to save the, oh my God. My condolences go out to the family of Joseph Chandler. I'm praying that there will be a private funeral for those and the condolences to those who lost Mr. Chandler. And I want to say to those people, Mr. Chandler's family, my condolences go to them. I think that's it. And I got to go catch the bus after this.
Well, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Okay, and I don't believe we have anyone else online or on the phone. Okay. All right, well, thank you so much. So that brings us to our consent calendar. Does any director wish to remove an item from the consent calendar? If not, I would, and thank you, entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, Director Davidson.
Second.
And a second from Director Holmstrom. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. That brings us to our action items. Item 6A, approve the 2025 legislative agenda. General Manager Pollock.
Great, thank you. So this evening, we'll be bringing the legislative, both federal and state agenda, as well as the board priorities and principles to you for adoption. Just before we bring our presenters up, I would state that this is an annual process that the board takes to adopt a legislative agenda to set direction for our legislative activities. We use this agenda as a guide when responding to legislative matters and as a communication tool when we meet with legislators and other interested parties. In December, the board's legislative committee did come together and meet and drafted up a proposed legislative agenda. And at our January work session, the full board reviewed that and made some minor revisions that have been incorporated into the agendas before you tonight. So before we make a recommendation, we do have our legislative advocate representative, CFM, here. We have Dale Penn in person, and Waylon Buchan and Kirby Garrett online. So I'll turn it over to Dale to kick us off.
All right, excellent. And we also have some PowerPoint testimony as well. The last time I presented, I think I had a clicker. Hopefully this will work. So, good evening. My name is Dale Penn. I'm the State Affairs Partner at CFM. And with me, I've got Kirby and Waylon, who represent Cherriots in both the Capitol here in Salem, but also in DC. We're going to start the presentation today by handing it over to Kirby, and he's going to provide a federal perspective, go over your agenda, answer questions, and then we'll transition to myself and Waylon to talk about everything happening in Salem. So Kirby, you're up.
All right. Thank you so much, Dale. Appreciate that. Good evening, board members, and yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to provide a presentation tonight. For those of you who have not met me, like Dale said, my name is Kirby Garrett. I am a partner for CFM Advocates, where I help lead our federal affairs practice back in Washington, D.C., and That's where we have the honor of advocating on your behalf. So just as some more background, like Alan alluded to, our primary duties on the federal side are to help you identify and outline your federal priorities, whether those are policies or funding items we're looking to pursue funding for, and then we work to achieve those items. So that's all outlined in the federal agenda that we're going to walk through here in a few minutes. Once that is put together, we work with your congressional delegation, with federal agencies to advocate for those priorities. And so I'm excited to talk through what we've achieved here in the recent years, and then also the projects that we're going to be putting forward in the coming year. So Dale, yeah, thank you, sir. Oh, yeah, one back, perfect. There we go. There it is. All right. Okay, so as I mentioned, just real quick, I'll touch on the successes that we've had, provide an overview of the federal agenda. I'm going to provide a quick recap of the election and just what that means for the political climate that we are working in DC, and then do my best to give you a preview of what's going to happen this year at the federal level. That's a hard, murky crystal ball, but I'll do my best. So I will try to pause at the end of each slide, but please do not hesitate to jump in and interrupt me if you have any questions along the way. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so recent successes. This is a slide I love to present. As you can see, this lists the accomplishments that we have made over the past 7 years. There's more even beyond that. I'm not going to go into each and every one of these just in the interest of time, but as you can see, we've been able to secure quite a bit here. This includes 3 very large federal grants and an earmark or congressionally directed spending. That's why you see CDS. That's the preferred name for them. So there are 4 total awards for battery electric buses. Together, those total nearly $23 million to acquire the first 20 electric buses for your fleet. Your entire delegation has been hugely helpful in that effort. Senator Merkley in particular has been a phenomenal champion, and you can see him there in that picture in the bottom left from the ribbon cutting that we hosted last fall, and it was just super awesome to see that come to fruition. We also worked with Congresswoman Salinas and your senators, secured 2 separate CDS awards for the South Salem Transit Center and Mobility Hub project. Those are mainly intended to address pre-construction costs and get that project primed for construction. So all in all, you can see, like I said, we've been on quite a tear here over the past 7 years, something we're really proud of, especially considering how competitive and oversubscribed some of these programs were, especially before the infrastructure bill. So that's something, again, we are really proud of, but also a huge shout out to you as an agency. That's something that you should hang your hat on. And, it's advocacy that we're really proud of, but it takes 2 to get this done. And so a huge shout out to Alan for his leadership, you all at the board, and the countless staff members who put so much into putting really good, strong projects forward. David Trimble, Melissa Kidd, and so many others helps make our job that much easier. So one of the things we like to keep track of is your return on investment in our federal services. Usually we're kind of trying to aim for like 10 to 1 or 15 to 1, and that's really strong. As you can see, over the past 7 years, yours is at 51 to 1. So for every dollar you're investing in our services, you're getting about $51 back in federal investment to your initiative. So that's something, again, we're really proud of and hope to build on here in the year ahead. Okay, so on that note, I'll turn to our federal agenda we've put together. As I mentioned, this is the document we put together each year, and we're looking forward to pursuing some of these exciting initiatives. So first, I'll focus on the funding requests, and there's primarily 3 here that we're going to focus on. So the first is, again, the South Salem Transit Center and Mobility Hub project. As you all know, planned transit center in South Salem would greatly enhance access and boost efficiency in your operations. As I talked about on the last slide, we have secured CDS or earmark funding for this. And now that has advanced with NEPA permitting moving forward and land acquisition moving forward, I think we are in a really prime position to pursue grant funding. We have applied already the past couple rounds to the Bus and Bus Facilities Grant Program and been unsuccessful, but we have received really high marks on our application. I think taking the steps that we have on the NEPA permitting and being able to demonstrate to FTA strong project readiness will be really helpful when we are putting this project forward to the next round of the program, which should be opening in the next couple months. The second item is we will be pursuing funding for 2 additional zero emission buses that will replace 2 aging diesel buses in your fleet. These would be the 21st and 22nd buses added using federal discretionary funding. Like the facility, this would be eligible for either a earmark or for a FTA grant. I think just the size of this project, we're looking at about a $2 to $2.5 million request. That paired with just how popular that request is with the delegation, I think makes it a very strong contender for an earmark that will hopefully be able to work with your delegation to secure in the upcoming appropriations legislation. And then last on the funding requests, we will be seeking funding for around $2 million in security upgrades at the Del Webb facility to upgrade your fence and gates to ensure protection of your rolling stock and ultimately for your drivers and riders as well. So quick story on this. So last year, we worked hard to gain eligibility to FEMA's Transit Security Grant Program, which can fund projects like this. That is a program that it's normally constrained to systems in the largest urban areas like New York, Dallas, Portland, Seattle, et cetera. However, FEMA does have some discretion to add other agencies if you can make a convincing case why. And so we went to FEMA and made that case. And I think we put forward a really compelling argument as to why Salem has unique challenges as being a state capital and hosting so many large regional events. And we also took that case to Congresswoman Salinas, who really went to bat for us with FEMA and made a strong case as well. And so ultimately, FEMA did add us to the list. And so we are now eligible for this additional grant program that we can pursue funding from. So shifting now to policy items. So the first one on here is just in continuing to advocate for more funding for the Bus and Bus Facilities Program and Low or No Emissions Program, which are the 2 primary discretionary grant programs that we can pursue grants from. This has been hugely fruitful looking back over the years and coordinating this with our advocacy for the Bus Coalition. And so now, as we are nearing the end of the infrastructure bill, this will be really important as well as we're approaching a new surface transportation reauthorization bill. So step number 1 is really for Congress to finalize the existing spending bill that they're kind of procrastinating. I'll touch on that in a minute. But then after that, we'll be focusing again on the appropriation cycle and trying to ensure a plus up or at least maintaining existing funding levels in that spending bill. That is going to be hard, as you might expect, in the new Congress and the new presidency that we are working with. With Republicans in charge, they are looking to rein in spending. But bus transit, relative to other forms, definitely fared well in the, Trump 1.0 administration. In fact, in his last year, he even put forward in his last budget request a proposed increase for bus funding, which was something we were really excited to see. So there's still hope, but it was going to take a lot of advocacy. The second policy item we have on here is just continuing to advocate for the alternative fuels tax credit extension. This is something that Cherriots receives about $200,000 annually to basically incentivize your continued use of CNG and other alternative fuels that reduce emissions. For as long as I can remember, Congress has passed 1 or 2 year extensions of this provision. Oftentimes that's retroactive after it's expired. Makes it super hard for you all to plan around that and actually know that funding is going to come to fruition. So it would be fantastic to see a permanent or a long-term extension. We did, in the Inflation Reduction Act, see a several-year extension included, which was awesome. but years go by fast, and that it has already expired at the end of 2024. The good news for us is Republicans are planning a major border security, energy tax package and trying to pass that in the first 100 days. They are calling it, for folks in the tax world, they're calling it the tax Super Bowl. Give you a flavor of how nerdy Washington can be sometimes. But all goes to say that is an opportunity to secure an extension like this. There will be a number of provisions for expiring or expired tax credits that they are looking to extend in that bill. So those are the items that we will be focusing on this year. And yeah, happy to take any questions on this. And if not, I can continue on to the next slide.
I think you can keep going.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk politics a little bit. So as you may have heard, we had an election in November. We have a new president. I will spare you more election commentary than you've probably already heard or want. But just to note here, looking at the map, President Trump was able to win all 7 of the battleground states as well as the popular vote. So in his mind, he is coming into office with a strong mandate to act on his campaign platform that he campaigned on. And we have seen that already in the first few days here of his new administration. All right, next slide. Thank you, Dale. So looking at the congressional map here. So real quick, major changes. The Senate flipped. So Republicans were able to flip 4 seats, including Montana, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and then also West Virginia, which was an open seat. That gives them a 3-seat majority, then plus the vice presidency. It's just a tie-breaking vote. That does give them some wiggle room to govern and legislate. That is not so true on the House side, where Republicans basically maintained their existing majority. They are dealing with an extremely tight margin, which was worsened by President Trump selecting a couple House Republicans for cabinet posts. So there will likely be a period here in the next couple months where Republicans will literally have a 1-seat majority and cannot afford to lose a single vote. And I'll touch on this in a second, but when you are looking at the complex and behemoth legislation that they want to pass, that's going to be extremely challenging, especially given how widely varying the interests are of different Republicans within the caucus. You have, fiscal hawks, foreign policy hawks, moderates from blue states looking for certain tax provisions like SALT. So it's just really, really hard to make everybody happy, and going to be a tough job for House Speaker Mike Johnson. Okay, so that's the world we're operating in back in Washington, D.C. Just touching on the Oregon delegation real quick. So Congresswoman Salinas secured another term, was reelected to her second term in Congress. Congresswoman Bynum flipped the seat previously held by Lori Chavez-Dreamer. Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden, neither of them were up for election, but Senator Merkley is now going to be the top Democrat on the Senate Budget Committee, and Senator Wyden will continue to be the ranking member, top Democrat on the Finance Committee. So Senator Merkley and Senator Wyden's influence and seniority continues to grow, which is fantastic for us and the state. And then Lori Chavez-Dreamer, who I mentioned, who represented the 5th District of Oregon, is going to be up here shortly for confirmation to be the next labor secretary under the Trump administration. So that will be another Oregonian back in DC in an influential position. Okay, so big picture, looking at politics back in DC. So there are kind of 3 main items that Congress is looking to tackle and / has to tackle. So the first is government spending. At the end of December, Congress passed another short-term spending bill to keep the lights on. So March 14th is our next government shutdown deadline. So they have to pass something again by that. That was an interesting choice for House Republicans to take that route. They had an opportunity to work with Democrats and pass a year-long spending bill at the end of the year that would have taken things off their plate. Instead, this is something they are going to have to tackle in the first 100 days of Trump's presidency when they want to focus on other priorities. But Republicans thought they would be able to influence the process more since they'll be in charge of the Senate and the House and the presidency. But to get a spending bill done, they have to work with Democrats to get over the filibuster. And that's going to lead to concessions and going to be a tricky process to negotiate that and get to a bipartisan compromise. The other complicating factor, the second big thing they need to tackle, is the debt limit. So that needs to be lifted or extended by probably sometime in early summer. We don't know the exact date yet. But the big question is where that gets included and how. Republicans have basically said they're not going to put it in their reconciliation bill for border security, tax reform, and energy policy because they know they'll lose votes if they do that. They'll lose their own votes and won't be able to get it across the finish line. So that leaves either a disaster bill that they're going to need to tackle at some point for the wildfires in California or the spending bill that I just mentioned. Either of those options are going to require concessions from Republicans to get Democrats on board. So that is going to be really interesting to see how that plays out. And then lastly, the reconciliation bill that I mentioned. So Republicans want to, in the first 100 days, with an aggressive timeline, ideally by Easter is what they've said, they want to pass this massive energy, border security, tax reform bill. And the reason they have an opportunity to do that is something called reconciliation. So you'll hear that word a lot. I won't bore you with the details. It's an arcane legislative procedure, which basically allows them to get around the filibuster and pass things with a simple majority. So all they need is Republican votes, and they have control of both chambers, so they can do that. The restrictions, though, are interesting. So it's a weird process. Basically, everything in a reconciliation bill has to have a specific budget impact, which really kind of ties their hands in terms of what can be included. We'll spare you details on that, but Republicans are looking to include things like permitting reform, defense and border spending, again, tax cuts, while also using cuts like EV tax credits, the green energy programs, and the Inflation Reduction Act, using things like that to pay for the other policies that they will want to continue going forward. So just again, passing this out of the House is going to be really, really hard. No Democrat is going to vote for it, and they, again, can't really spare any Republican defections until they fill the empty seats they're going to have in the coming months through a special election. So it's going to be a roller coaster. Get out your popcorn because it will be certainly taking up the national political news headlines for the months to come. The last thing I'll say is this is Trump 2.0. So that we have already seen some interesting and stark differences compared to the first administration. Not only is Congress now full of Trump-aligned Republicans, whereas 8 years ago, a lot of Republicans were pretty skeptical of the president, and some even ran in opposition to him. So he has a lot of allies now in the Republican Party and basically commands them. But he is also, according to his own language, he's learned his lessons from the first go around. So whatever that means, we have seen him try to approach things a lot more organized and forcefully, I guess I would say. He signed a flurry of executive orders on day one, ranging from immigration to pardons. One of those kind of caught our alarm bells. Was stalling all disbursements basically under the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It referenced a couple of specific programs, but basically said, we want to stall all spending on these existing grant programs under those two laws. That basically put a freeze on a ton of transportation projects nationwide. they issued the next day, because the blowback was pretty swift, a clarifying memo. But even that, there's still a lot, a lot of clarifying they need to do. Ultimately, it appears like programs like the bus and bus facilities program, low or no emissions, should be in the clear, but we are actively tracking that, and it's just a good example of sort of the new Washington we are going to be operating under. Obviously, there are going to be a lot of opportunities for us to pursue funding and policy wins for your projects, but there are definitely items like that where we're going to be playing some defense as well. So that is all I had. Thank you so much for your time. More than happy to take questions, but just again wanted to say thanks for the opportunity to provide an update here and present the agenda. And thank you so much to Cherriots for continuing to put your faith in us to represent you back in DC.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from our board directors? No? Okay, fascinating. Alrighty, well, thank you so much, Kirby.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. I'll pull this over here. Thank you very much. Again, Dale Penn with CFM, State Affairs Partner. I've got Waylon with me as well. And just as a reminder, we represent you in the Salem Capitol like Kirby does in DC. So my agenda, I'll try to be efficient and brief where needed, and then of course available to answer any questions that anyone has. Our agenda, go over our state affairs team really quickly, then look at the 2025 legislative session, which just started, talk a little bit about timeline and dates, and then discuss some of the major issues, especially those from a transportation standpoint that Cherriots will care about. Go over and discuss our state legislative agenda for Cherriots, and then talk a little bit about some of the bills of interest that we've seen already in session. So that's our state affairs team. Waylon and I do most of the work for Cherriots, but we have a 5-person team in Salem. CFM has been around since 1990. I'm born and bred and raised here in Salem. And really have a sense of community with Cherriots and everyone here. We love working for you and working on behalf of investing in transit in Oregon. So let's talk a little bit about the 2025 session. So as I mentioned, session has started as of pretty much last week during organizational days, education for new sworn-in legislators, a State of the State address by the governor, quite a bit of pomp and circumstance that first week. And then this week, after the holiday on Tuesday, we started committee hearings. And that's where, in Oregon, we have a very committee-driven process, whereas other states, you can amend a bill on the floor, you can do some other things. In Oregon, all work has to go through committees, and those started on Tuesday. We've already had quite a few hearings on bills, informational hearings, and work sessions will probably start in the next couple weeks, and bills will start moving. So in Oregon, we have a requirement in our Constitution that for our long sessions, session has to go a constitutionally limited maximum of 160 days. And so with January 13th being the start, the June 29th is our official sine die, meaning that we can end before that. And I think the plan is from legislative leadership to potentially do that. They have to constitutionally end by the 29th. So by the 29th, we'll know everything around policy, around budget, whether a transportation package has passed, and how that, of course, impacts Cherriots. We have a couple deadlines for chamber deadlines on April 9th and May 23rd, and there's a couple others in session. But in essence, deadlines for when bills have to move out of one chamber or have a work session by a specific date, those set guidelines for policy actions in the building. Now, a lot of what we care about is going through a joint committee, a committee with both representatives and senators. And that committee, the Joint Committee on Transportation, can ignore that first chamber deadline and really has to do all the work by the second. So there's a little bit of flexibility there, and we'll be monitoring quite a bit in that committee and others for you throughout session. The other thing I'll mention about legislative session is that the only constitutional duty lawmakers have is to pass a budget. Everything else is kind of extra. And so lawmakers will spend the next 5 months hammering out budget, but they'll also do a bunch of policy work. And that budget is a 2-year biennial budget. And then, of course, we'll come back next year and have a conversation for 35 days in the short session to make any tweaks that are needed. The May 14th final economic forecast is the kind of cornerstone that legislators build their budget off of. So we'll have a lot of conversation between now and the economic forecast date around policy, around investments in different programs, not only for transportation, behavioral health, housing, water infrastructure, everything in between, public safety, education, everything. But really, once we get the final numbers, May 14th is when The Economist has what is the most accurate forecast of Oregon's revenue for the next 2 years, and we base our budget off of that. And so at that point, it's a real kind of slog between May 14th and the end of session, hammering out final budget bills, and then, of course, approaching sine die and ending. Some of the major issues we're going to be talking about in session this year are issues that we've talked about over the last few sessions as well. Housing will be a huge component of what we talk about. The governor will release legislation relatively soon that will kind of highlight where she sees housing investments needing to occur. Healthcare funding, Medicaid, we have to have another conversation this year around our Medicaid system, our CCOs, or coordinated care organizations, how we provide that service. Education funding, K through 12, as well as investments in secondary education. But then also for us is a transportation package. And almost everyone from Republican, Democrat, leaders, committee members, everyone agrees that we need to have a conversation about a transportation package, and there is a ton of work being done to secure a package passing this year. Waylon's going to talk a little bit more about some of the intricacies, how we got here with a transportation package, what's happening in the interim, the timeline from now until the end of session, the likelihood of passage, all of those things. And one other component of our legislative session is our capital. And over the last few sessions, I should say, we have been under construction in the building, and that remains today. Everyone who lives here in Salem knows along the main thoroughfares downtown, we have massive construction, a lot of construction vehicles and work going on in the building. Some of that is lessening. They're in the process of the build back phase of the construction at the Capitol, meaning we're going to start seeing some stuff added and finished over the next few months, and there is a possibility that Oregonians will have access to more of their capital by the end of session than they did at the beginning, which is the first time in several years. They've already opened up a little bit of additional walkway in the hallway if you've been there, and we'll see more of that. We may have the rotunda available, the dome. It's going to be an exciting period of time, but until then, the ability for citizens to participate in the process is hampered by that construction, and everyone acknowledges that. It's required us to really adapt, lean into virtual testimony, and that's, I think, a benefit for people outside of our area. So that continues, and that means that some of the hearings that you may attend or watch will have lots of construction noise in the background, and that's just been what's happening the last few years. So. Last thing I want to mention, and this isn't necessarily a legislative issue, but I wanted to make note that there's another very important date coming up from a legislative standpoint, and that's the 29th of this month. And the 29th of this month is important because it is when the Senate, as well as the House advocates, people in the Capitol will come together to honor the late Senate President Peter Courtney. There will be a historic celebration of life event at the Capitol where both the House and the Senate is reserved for videos, for speeches to honor Peter, who was a huge champion of Cherriots, one of the first, if not the first, board members, as well as someone who was nicknamed the busboy and who helped us on many occasions. After that celebration of life at the Capitol, it will move to the YMCA here in town, and it will be a great opportunity to say goodbye and appreciate the life of someone who's been very important to this organization and to everyone in the state. So I'll turn it over to Waylon to talk a little bit about the 2025 transportation package.
Good evening, everyone. Waylon Buchan here, and thank you for having me. I'm a little under the weather tonight, so I sequestered myself over here in my home office in Independence as to not share with any of you. But just to dive right in, our last transportation package was passed in 2017 through House Bill 2017, as many of you know. Historic investment. It was larger than all of our previous transportation packages combined previously, raising nearly $5.3 billion over 8 years. Targeted investments all over Oregon. It also established the STIF, as you know, so it supported that by a statewide payroll tax, which has been transformative as a revenue stream for all the transit providers, including Cherriots. This summer, the Joint Transportation Committee toured the state on what they called their statewide transportation roadshow. And they visited about a dozen locations all across Oregon. And in those communities, they held public hearings to gather feedback from voters in anticipation for basically this moment, this year, where they're going to undertake a transportation investment package again in 2025. This was a bit of an attempt to recreate some of the magic and what was viewed as a successful roadshow before the 2017 package. And just like that previous roadshow, I'll note that the tour of Oregon reiterated that people strongly supported public transit. In every single location, we heard public testimony calling for more transit investment, among other things. But that was one of the key highlights in every location. This time around, the primary goal of the transportation package is going to look very different. It's going to be mostly to shore up ODOT's ongoing budget deficit. They face a really serious budget shortfall on the operations and maintenance side of their ledger, and they're seeking additional revenues so they can continue basic functions like highway maintenance, striping, snow plows, graffiti cleanup, and the like, and all of the other non-capital project functions of the agency. That's not to say they don't have enough money to complete projects. For the most part, the money they do have is pre-programmed through legislation to support those capital projects, but where they're really hurting is on the maintenance side. So after the roadshow, the Joint Committee then launched into some online breakout work groups to tackle 3 different categories: maintenance and operations, transit, and active transportation. And one work group was dedicated to unfinished 2017 projects that remain unfunded or incomplete, like I-205 or the Rose Quarter. So they tried to break out into 3 different areas, and we had folks participating in all of those so we could sort of track it as it went. Work groups basically concluded right before we jumped into session, and now transportation leaders are hard at work getting their framework and all that stakeholder feedback drafted into legislation. So they have an aggressive time frame that they've announced. They hope to get a bill drafted and passed out of their committee by March, which does feel very ambitious. But they've also stated they want to sort of get transportation off the table because there, as Dale noted in that previous slide, there are other very high profile and important issues that leadership hopes to tackle, like housing, behavioral health, and others. So the obstacles that really lie ahead this year, there's no question there are obstacles. First, the gas tax is kind of right there. That's the elephant in the room. It's diminishing as a revenue stream as vehicles electrify or just continue to get more fuel efficient. So they're collecting less and less on that big revenue stream that they've relied on for so many years. And this is part of why ODOT's budget is not keeping pace with all their statewide needs. It's also difficult to craft a really enticing transportation bill that will attract votes when the goal is baseline maintenance rather than building shiny new bridges and roads and things like we did in 2017. The trucking industry is out there, and they're one of the primary ratepayers that support the system. They're not very happy with the idea of another very large tax increase when they haven't really been given the projects that they were completed, like 205 and Rose Quarter. The crown jewel of the previous package were their big freight bottlenecks, and so they still are expecting that to come to fruition. They're also overpaying, according to Oregon's constitution, which requires a balance between light and heavy vehicles and the proportion they do damage to the roads. And with that out of balance, it's really hard to ask them to pay more money when they're essentially already overpaying. The bright spot of the transportation discussion, transit. We're actually sort of a success story compared to a lot of the other modes. And generally, legislators view us favorably. They view the investments made in 2017 favorably. If lawmakers can't get excited about filling potholes, we do hope that they'll get excited about things like new bus service and new intercity connections, zero emission buses, and other sort of tangible benefits that we can point to provided by the STIF. And as part of the legislative agenda that we hope to undertake for you, we want to support that. If there's an increase to be had and more investment to send your way, that's one of our prime directives. And we also want to protect that statewide transportation investment fund at the same time. I'll pause there, and Dale, if you have anything you would like to add on that transportation package. It's a big, complex subject.
Yeah, and Waylon mentioned the kind of the positive feelings towards transit from the 2017 package. I'll highlight that Cherriots plays probably a disproportionately impactful role in that emotion. Your project, the focus of the first tranche of STIF funding was on weekend and evening service. That was a messaging that was easy to understand, as opposed to saying just more service or better service or more connectivity, saying I want to put buses on the road on Saturdays and Sundays and later in the evening for people. That was easy for legislators and advocates from the human services side and around the state, around the Capitol, to understand. And that was hugely impactful as we negotiated the first 2017 package. So, any other questions about the potential 2025 transportation package that Waylon or I could answer? Yes.
Go ahead.
With the election outcome giving supermajorities to the majority party, does the calculus change from 2017, where bipartisanship was by design needed? I kind of assume that for a transportation package that's still mostly needed, but do you have a sense of if the lay of the land has changed?
Yes, Director Davidson, it's a great question. And what we have been told, and Waylon can chime in on this too, but we've been told by leaders on the Joint Committee on Transportation is that they want an open and transparent process. They want to involve their Republican vice chairs in every decision, every conversation. They do not want the package to be developed in a back room with whiskey and cigars. They want it to be out in the light. They want sunshine on it, and that's going to require getting buy-in. The last package in 17 was on life support for most of the session. But there was true work between the Democratic and Republican chairs and vice chairs of those committees, whether it was Senator Boquist, whether it was Senator Bentz or others who participated and helped carry that across the finish line. And I think the chairs of the current Joint Committee have that same ideal and goal going into this. But you're absolutely right. A 36-18 Democratic supermajority presents some different math on vote counts that we didn't have in 17. So, Waylon, I don't know if you'd add anything or.
That was really well said. And I think sometimes the trick is that when you have such a big tent, it can be hard to satisfy even a whole camp of Democrats that are in a supermajority, because some may not like highway expansion, some may be staunch transit advocates. But then I think of people on the Republican side like Kevin Mannix, Representative Kevin Mannix, who's one of your most outspoken transit advocates in committees so far this year. And so I would expect that to be a vote they could count on if the rest of the package looks right. But to Dale's point, I think they're going to have to strike a pretty important balance if they want to have it be bipartisan. And that is what they're striving for.
Great. So I know this committee's already talked quite a bit about your legislative agenda for 25. I won't spend a ton of time going on over this unless we need to ask questions. But as Waylon mentioned, one of our key priorities is preserving, maintaining, and enhancing public transportation investments. And really that's focused on the STIF, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, which was passed as part of 2017 package. That remains our single greatest priority. Every session, we see legislation or we hear rumors or attempts to swipe some of that money in different ways. In fact, after we had passed it in 17, in the 18 short session, there were legislators involved in the creation of the STIF who wanted to shift some of it elsewhere. So it is something we are constantly on the lookout for. There's a couple bills on one of our last slides that touch on changing that process or getting rid of it entirely. So that is something that we continue to have our highest priority, and it was where we're going to allocate all of our political capital if needed. The transportation package is a huge component of what's going on this year. Are there opportunities to invest in transit? And if so, what does that look like? So we're working with our advocate allies in the Oregon Transit Association, which include small, large, and everyone in between transit providers on that package and making sure transit's a key component, which I think everyone agrees needs to be part of it. Zero emission vehicles, always something that we try to maintain an eye out for opportunities to invest. In the past, we've helped address some tax credit issues to get you guys funding to then invest in zero emission vehicles. We're innovative, always innovative, and trying to think of different ways to invest in that component. Always supporting investments in footpaths and bicycle trails. And then we're keeping an eye out. I haven't seen a bill yet, but the conversation from previous sessions around the WES commuter passenger rail line and other opportunities to invest and those kind of services are things that we're going to be tracking for you. All right. So bills of interest, Waylon and I will both kind of go on this. Senate Bill 160 is the bill that I just mentioned. This is a bill that, so just as taking a step back, session started, as many of you know, at the beginning of session, a lot of bills get dropped. We had over 2,200 bills right before session started, which is probably 400 or 500 bills more than we traditionally see in a long session. And then we expect a few hundred more over the next couple weeks. And we've already seen about maybe 250 more, 200 roughly more in the last few days. So we have to consistently track all of those. But out of those 2,500 plus bills, there are a few that impact transit. One of them, Senate Bill 160, would repeal the STIF entirely. So we are trying to understand the background on this. We think that this is this will not receive a public hearing, but we have to be very careful about it. We think that repealing the STIF would drastically and negatively impact transit districts all over the state, not just Cherriots, everyone. So this is one we're going to be closely monitoring bills that have relating to clauses that this can be finding its way into. So this is one of our biggest bills that we're going to be having under a microscope. In addition to that, House Bill 2795 would try to make modifications to the STIF and the qualified entity process. And that does impact Cherriots and impacts other providers who are QEs around the state. So that's a bill, of course, we're going to be monitoring. Again, anything that impacts the STIF. Several of the other 2155 through 2160 miscellaneous bills, speed bump bills, and others that are avenues where the transportation package or other big pieces of legislation, policy, and budget that could impact transit, we're monitoring. And then, Waylon, I'll let you talk about a few of the others here, but just know that we have probably several dozen bills that we're tracking very closely for Cherriots, and that will grow. We'll continue to keep Alan and your team and yourselves updated on how things are going and what concepts we see, and we'll move very quickly. We work with the advocates. We meet regularly with our other transit lobbyists to coordinate strategy on all of these things.
Excellent. And I'll just note that in the transportation package potential bills, when I was back at ODOT, we used to always label our placeholders as a statewide study on speed bump heights. And that's just to indicate they're placeholder bills, but it never fails. There's usually someone from the public that shows up to testify in opposition to us studying speed bump heights. So just never fear, that's not what they're going to be. They'll be gut and stuffed, as we call it, with other language that will support a transportation package. On to the other ones. So 2880, transit system grants for smaller cities. This is a Rep. Evans bill. It would allow a particular state agency, the Oregon Business Development Department, to make grants to small cities under 35,000 population for the purpose of supporting transit functions when they're within their boundaries. It has a bunch of other criteria. One of the noteworthy ones is that requires the existence of a public university or a community college. It almost looks like it's written for my little town and the little trolley that goes through it, but don't quote me on that. You can read between the lines if you look at the legislation. Another Rep. Evans bill, 2721, is one that we've seen before. It would allow cities or counties to impose a surcharge on parking fines that would support transit in that area. Seems like it has some good intentions behind it. We've never really gotten into the mechanics of how exactly that all plays out, and it hasn't succeeded before, but it's back again, and we'll continue to watch that. 2383 is, once again, Rep. Evans, but also a coalition of some others. And that would allow a general manager in a mass transit district to appoint unarmed security officers that can provide security services. And the way I view the legislation is sort of act as additional eyes and ears within the service of a mass transit district. Moving a little farther down the list, we don't have a bill on this one yet, but it's something we're watching for and kind of have our ear to the ground on right to strike legislation. So the background on this one is back in sort of 2007 era. Unions were successful in persuading the legislature to place transit workers in the same category as police and firefighters for non-strikeable public employees. And ordinarily, any disputes take place through binding arbitration if they're going to be resolved. And now we've seen bills, in 2023, we saw ATU bring a bill that would change that dynamic. We do anticipate seeing another version of that legislation in 2025, but again, it's not in our current bill stack. We also anticipate additional bills which are going to seek to address driver or rider safety on transit systems. So we'll continue to report back as those develop.
And in regards to the driver and rider safety legislation, it was heartening to see some of the data that the previous presentation shared with you around how your riders feel and the public feel around transit safety. That's great to see that Cherriots has a really positive story to tell in that sense. So. All right, that I think is it. We're here to answer, of course, any questions. We really appreciate the opportunity, both Waylon and I, to represent you at the Capitol, and we look forward to working with you on a whole slate of issues this year. So,
Thank you very much. Any questions? Director Davidson?
This one's not a question, but if House Bill 2383 does end up having legs, I would love us to take a closer look at it. That's the where the general manager can deputize transit security officers, but they're not peace officers, but they are when you look at the ORS that they're referring to. Anyways, I have some questions, concerns, and I'd love to have us take a look at that if it has legs. If it doesn't have legs, no skin off my teeth. But yeah, thank you very much, though.
of course.
Director Duncan?
I think I've already said this to you before, so I'm just saying it for the sake of saying it, that I've heard grumblings in certain meetings that I'm in that people are interested in seeing a weight tax for electric vehicles. And I just, for the sake of saying so, would like people to remember that electric vehicles are not the only vehicles that have become heavier over the years that are personal vehicles. And I would like to make sure that the legislature remembers that too. Thank you.
Understood.
Any other? Director Holmstrom?
Thank you both very much for coming and presenting. This is interesting. In terms of the gas tax and its declining viability over time, it was my impression that, the legislature is going to have to make some hard decisions about revenue sources going into the future for the highway side of things. But it's not clear to me that there's an appetite there right now. Where do you see that, or what are you willing to say in public about where you think that's going to go? I mean, no one can see the future, but thank you. I appreciate that.
It's a great question. I'll let Waylon answer because I'm sure he has a good response. So.
They're sort of painted into a revenue corner, to your point, and it's very challenging and very difficult. A lot of other states are going to be wrestling with this as well in the near future because the CAFE standards, electrification, is upon all of us. We don't have tolling or a sales tax as sort of that third leg of the stool like a lot of other states do. So we're going to have to address this sort of sooner rather than later. Right now, if they were to just try to increase the gas tax or the fuels tax, they're probably going to run into something called elasticity, where the more you raise it, the less people drive. They don't notice a little gas tax, but if you put too much on them, they may actually drive less, and then you're back in the same problem where you're not getting the per gallon revenue from that fuel sold. So the other alternative might be registration fees on vehicles, sort of a captive audience there. And we've heard a lot of discussion about maybe a heavy registration fee, and that could be just an interim step to what I would call the gold standard of revenue collection and transportation, a road user charge. Someday, somehow, we might get to a ruck, and what I've heard as one example would be that we'd load up the registration fee, we being ODOT and the legislature, and if you didn't like that you had a very high registration fee, you might say, I want more precision, and I'd like to opt in to the ORGO system, which exists today. It's kind of characterized as a pilot, but it does exist, and you can opt into it right now. And that would just charge you, I think the current rate is 2.2 cents per mile as a way to sort of balance out what your obligations would be for your household to the transportation system. That number needs to go up. Maybe someday it's 4 cents a mile or what have you. But the interim step is maybe a blunt instrument in the form of a registration fee, because they don't really have the ability to just max out on fuel taxes. So a little bit of a transportation nerd answer there, but that's a big answer to a big question.
Thank you, I appreciate that. We've seen recently in the last, I guess, month or so, New York City has adopted a congestion charge for Lower Manhattan. It seems to be going maybe better than people thought. And there had been talk about that around the Portland metropolitan area in particular. And that had kind of been put on pause by the governor, I think, kind of punting to the legislature this year. Do we think there's going to be any movement on, beyond the RUC, some sort of facility-specific pricing of any sort? Or is that just not on the table right now? Thank you.
I'll tackle this one again, Dale. I think they may be missing a step if they want to jump into something like congestion pricing or even RUC, because we don't really have a back office established like Washington State does to collect tolls. Tolling, as you astutely noted, is sort of on pause, at least for what was envisioned as that wishbone scheme that would go through the Portland area. Bridgehead tolling on I-205, congestion pricing at the Rose Quarter. We're basically stepping away from that. And we do see, even in Governor Kotek's initial letter, a recognition that the I-5 interstate bridge is probably going to require tolling. And then Abernathy may still be in play. And that's, as you noted, probably going to be at the direction of the legislature. It's a tough decision to make, but maybe they'll find themselves right where lawmakers in 2017 found themselves, that there's just not enough money in the bank unless you implement tolling. So we'll see. It's sort of a to be determined right now.
All right. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so I do believe that brings us into our item for approval of a contract with Nelson. No?
Need to motion to adopt.
Oh, wait, I'm jumping. I'm not even approving motions yet. Look at me.
Can I make a motion?
You're allowed.
I move that the board adopt the 2025 legislative agenda and board priorities and principles as shown in attachment A, B, and C.
I'll second.
Okay, motion Director Davidson, second from Director Carney. Any discussion on the motion? No? All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, now it's award of contract for comprehensive operational analysis project.
Great, I'll ask our service planning manager, Chris French, please come forward and present the report.
Good evening, President and host Pressey and members of the board. I'm here this evening to ask you to approve a contract with Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates for the completion of the district's comprehensive operational analysis, referred to often as the COA. This initiative is to evaluate our current services for the district, to enhance and evaluate and enhance the transit service that the district provides. The COA will leverage data that we currently have, work with stakeholders in the community and the board, and use strategic planning tools to develop an actionable recommendation to ensure the district has a sustainable, equitable, and resilient transit system for the future. The district issued a request for proposals in November. We received 4 proposals, and Nelson and Nygaard was evaluated as the highest. It was evaluated and scored the highest of the 4 proposals, with an estimated cost of $339,722. The project is expected to take 12 months. This project is funded in this current budget with STIF formula funds of $250,000 and $89,722 from the general fund. This project will carry over into budget year FY26. At this time, staff would recommend that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates, Inc. for the COA project for an amount not to exceed $339,722. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Any questions? Director Holmstrom?
Yeah, thank you very much. Looks great. Very excited for this project to happen. It says in your report there will be board check-ins along the way. Hopefully we'll have some work sessions scheduled where we can really dig into some of these things along the way. That'd be super, at least from where I'm sitting. Appreciate it.
Yes, that is part of the plan for it, not just updates, but engagement with the board.
All right. Okay. Y'all are quiet today. So I'll go ahead and I move that the board authorize the general manager to execute a contract with Nelson Nygaard Consulting Associates, Inc. for a comprehensive operational analysis project for an amount not to exceed $339,722.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Yes, Director Davidson.
I just want to echo Director Holmstrom's comments and say that I am also very, very excited for this. I think, is one of the next pieces that Cherriots really needs to be able to provide the service that this community needs. And so once we have the information and the data from the comprehensive operational analysis, we'll be able to better provide the service that the community needs. So really looking forward to it. Thank you.
Any further discussion? No? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we come into our informational reports, and hopefully we'll get an answer to our public commenter. That's Mobility Reimagined Outreach Brief. General Manager Pollack?
Okay, great, thank you. So this is a follow-up from our work session where the board asked for kind of a briefing on the plan for outreach. So I'll ask our Chief Communications Officer, Patricia Feeney, please come forward, along with our Chief Planning and Development Officer, Shofi Ul-Azum.
Good evening again, members of the board. This evening, we're going to present an overview of what we are planning for our Mobility Reimagined, Transforming Public Transit for a Connected Community. On the next slide, you'll see that we have provided an overview. Are you driving, Shofi? Okay. We are going to be doing a series of community open houses beginning in February. The goal is to solicit public feedback on our proposed transit service enhancement plan. It's going to be a very interactive format with dedicated stations that we're planning right now, along with the planning team. This is an opportunity to engage directly with riders and community members. Oh, back up one. There we go. So again, starting in February, probably going through spring. We haven't defined the dates and times yet. As soon as we do that, though, we will be promoting that through our usual communication channels. Right now, we're identifying different community centers and other venues, and I'll get to that in more detail. What we're looking at right now is so that we capture as much of our community members as possible is during the weekdays doing something from 11 to 1, and then evenings from 6 to 8. And we're committed also to doing weekend afternoons from 1 to 4, again, giving everybody an opportunity to attend them. And so some of the potential venues we're looking at, and again, these are not confirmed, and we're also seeking the board's input on some possible other venues, particularly Kaiser. We have not identified a venue. But we're looking at the YMCA, which has always been a strong partner, the Kroc Center, Center 50 Plus. Chemeketa Community College already received a very enthusiastic call back from them. community health education, our own customer service lobby, and again, others if the board has any recommendations for us. The open house stations that we've identified, of course, a welcome and orientation station, talking with the planning team, a station for UMO where we can actually do signups in the moment. We want a Cherriots information hub and a Tell Your Transit story. And so a little more detail on the welcome and orientation. We really want this to set the stage for the open house event, to let people know this is going to be warm, welcoming, educational, give them a little roadmap on what they can expect. But the meat and potatoes, as I like to call it, is going to be station number 2, which is a talk with the planning team. And that is going to be, Shofi's going to talk a little bit about that.
Good evening, President Enos, Presi, and other board of directors. I would like to address the public comments first before we go there. So basically, in a layman's term, how we can better connect our community, removing access barriers, and maybe potentially addressing new service delivery in addition to the fixed routes, and how we can improve our service efficiency and effectiveness. Basically, all those things, we're reimagining our services and how we can move people more effectively. And so that's the better, easiest way to explain. It's ambitious goal, and let's see how much we can achieve. All right, so to this one, our board has a subcommittee, service enhancement subcommittee, and Cherriots staff has worked with the subcommittee for the last 12 months to develop a draft service enhancements plan. And we have prepared that plan based on the survey that we have done last few years, including customer satisfaction survey, and community value surveys, long-range transit plan, and needs assessment. So our Cherriots staff synthesized all those findings and prepared a few tactics in the service enhancements plan. And at this point, we will go out there on those public events and explaining how we came up with those enhancements and tactics. And we'd like to get their feedback if there is anything missing or if they would like to see anything different than what we have already heard. So this is a golden opportunity for the community in Salem and residents in Salem and Kaiser to provide us feedback and how we can better address those connectivity issues and removing the barriers. The whole planning team and other Cherriots staff, they will be out there to listening to them. And so I would highly encourage our residents to show up and provide us feedback so how we can achieve our goals for service reimagine and mobility reimagine.
Our Station 3, right now, we would be focusing on UMO. People would be able to practice how to tap. They'll be able to do demos of trip planning. We're going to have an actual reader there. We'll have posters explaining the different fares, information on fare capping. And then Station 4 is what we're calling the Cherriots Information Hub. People would be able to have access to our route maps and our schedules, again, information on things like the youth fair, the types of vehicles. Ideally, what we would like to do is to have one of our electric buses stationed outside of the event so that people can have a tour and see what's going on with that outstanding service. And then we do have a sustainability brochure that would point out what's happening with RNG, CNG, and the fact that we're the cleanest fleet. And then we also would like to station our brand new Chief Safety and Security Officer at that information hub as well. The last you'll recognize these characters. The last station is going to be Tell Your Cherriots story, which we all know is one of the most important things that we need to be doing right now. We are going to have an opportunity for people to take photos with the characters if they choose to, but also we want to have an opportunity for people to have more of a freestanding area to tell their stories so that we can use it for multiple purposes, especially for legislative materials and similar. We will have a photo wall, what we're calling it, to highlight the community impact that we have had over the most recent years. And then there's two opportunities for sign up. One at the welcome station. People will be signing in, and then at the end, if they miss that sign up for whatever reason, they can sign up again. Particularly on this area, it's going to be for rider alerts and for newsletters. The outreach strategy that we're proposing, right now we do have a dedicated web page. It's not live yet. It's going to be soon. We'll do our comprehensive social media campaign. We'll have promotional materials in the buses and at our transit centers. We're also incorporating QR codes wherever appropriate so people can get more information. We've had a lot of success in the past with partnerships with community organizations who include us in their e-newsletters and e-blasts. Of course, we'll have press releases and media outreach. The expected outcomes is that we, of course, are going to gather valuable information from our community to help shape future plans, increase public awareness of our transit initiatives, build stronger relationships with riders and our stakeholders, identify potential service improvements and priorities, and generate positive media coverage and community goodwill. Our next steps are to finalize the venues and the dates, recruit and train our staff, develop our materials, which we are doing right now with our marketing group. We're working closely with planning, and we will be briefing then the board on the results after completion of our open houses, and then incorporate the feedback into future transit plans. And with that concludes this part of our presentation. We have a second part. Our Terrell partners are with us this evening. And so if you have questions for us, we're ready to answer. If not, I will introduce Terrell.
Do we have any questions for staff? Director Duncan.
Sorry, my mic's been being weird all evening. Ha. All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this. I know you guys have heard me asking about this for a while, so I really appreciate it. I guess my question is, you have the interactive activities to capture suggestions and feedback. Is that what the stations are? Just to be
correct.
Is there going to be an opportunity for people to? The service enhancement plan involves a lot of looking at like what areas we would be potentially adding service, types of things that we'd be adding, such as everything from, additional stop infrastructure to, like the types of like rides. UMO is a pre-existing service, and that seems to be a thing that would potentially be for new riders. It's the same thing with all of our current routes and maps. Is there going to be anything about like what would be added? I feel like there isn't a lot of information about what the new program will be adding.
Thank you, Director Duncan. So, a great question, first of all. So, we are working on the materials, like how, and we're going to design the stations for those. But yes, we're working on those, and the reason we keep it really wide open, so it's not just us telling them this is what we're going to do. So, we're going to set the foundation. This is what we have already heard, and based on the feedback, this is what we have already developed. And depending on how the conversation goes, we're going to provide them our insights and opinions, but we will provide them the opportunity, like if they can literally use the push pin. I live in this area, but I work here, but currently it takes 45 minutes, but I would love to have something to remove those barriers. So those kind of feedbacks, yes, they will have the opportunity to provide us using the push pins, like there is a gap, I would love to have some sort of gap filler services in those areas that will help me to go to my work or doctor's visit or something like that. So the purpose, so we will address this, and this is why we're calling it mobility reimagined. So that includes not only just fixed routes, but also the first mile and last mile connections, and how exactly we can better connect our community and the community needs.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying. Will there be information about like what on-demand transit is, why we're doing the study on, like being able to get, we talked about like bikes and scooters and those types of things. Is that also included?
Yes, so you see there will be a station like ongoing projects and efforts. So we will be, our main focus is service enhancements plan, but there will be those secondary but relevant information. We will also have a station for that. And if there is question and there will be stuff, they will be answering and providing information as they appears. So yes, our plan is to showcase what we have been doing and how we can do a better job with this new plan.
Great, thank you. I think my last little bit, and then I'll yield the floor to other people. I love the open houses. I also want to highlight that we can target pre-existing community meetings. The city of Salem, when they were doing their big 10-year plan or whatever it was years ago, I remember being at a Rotary meeting where they showed up and did almost this exact same thing. They might still have a list. It might be a great resource to us. I'd love to see us run a greeters, Chamber of Commerce, both Kaiser and Salem. I'd love to see us do presentations at all the Rotaries, Latino Business Alliance, et cetera, as well. Since those are pre-existing meetings that we already have a captive audience at, that might be different than people that would self-select to come to an open house. So I just wanted to highlight that one more time, because if you built a good thing, might as well take it on the full show. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Duncan.
Thank you, Director Duncan. I think also to build on that last point, on the open house locations that we're shopping around, all of those are on a bus route, right? And so I'm hoping that we could also open some open houses in areas that are not on a bus route, so that way we can also make sure that we're reaching the folks that
New riders.
yeah, that don't ride, and like be able to provide input on what would remove the barrier for getting them on the bus.
Makes sense.
Any other questions? No? Okay, so then we will thank you two and then anxiously await our Terrell Group friend.
I would like to introduce Dana Terrell, who is the president of the Terrell Group. And this is our public relations partner who is helping us move forward. And one of the particular areas we're really excited about is the ideas that they have for collecting stories and storytelling. So Dana, I will turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Patricia, and hello. I am really glad to be here. I want to first tell you that Patricia and the team on the communications group has been very wonderful to work with, and we've had a good time collaborating with them, and they've been super helpful and working with us to get to know Cherriots and all of your brand standards and design and storytelling things that you already have in motion. So we've spent the last several months working with them, getting to know them, and getting to know all of you and how Cherriots operates. It's been really wonderful. So I am Dana Terrell, and we are Terrell Group. I thought I'd just spend a little bit of time letting you know who we are. And did that work? Okay, it worked. We are values-driven people who focus on serving you. So we're all about service. We like to help the helpers. And you at Cherriots are in that position, and so we are really honored to support your work in getting people where they need to go. We believe in bus service and in mobility, and you'll see in a future slide we work with lane transit districts, so we have some experience in helping people do just that, and we're glad to do it here in the Salem area with you. I'll briefly go through these slides. That's me with the balls, I'm the juggler, and client leads also are Jenna and Renee. Renee is also our research director. Jenna leads public affairs, so we round out communications, marketing, and research and public affairs. Operations team are our project managers. We have 3 writers, Jenica being our creative director, with 3 graphic designers, Cress being our art director, a 4-person photo and video team who we will use with you to tell stories. And we are a full-service marketing and communications firm. So anything you can kind of think of under that marketing and communications umbrella, we provide. CFM is your specialist for all of the lobbying and government type stuff, and for all the other audiences, we work in advertising, graphic design, photography, PR, public affairs, research and planning, video production, websites, writing, and editing. I mentioned that we work with Lane Transit District, and the benefit that brings to you is that we've been through some of these things with them. In fact, they're also reimagining their mobility efforts, and so some of this, we just get to lend the experience that we have with them to you. We just found out, I think yesterday, that the first State of the District event that they had last year won first place in APTA. So that was exciting. It was a whirlwind to pull that together, and it actually was quite effective and brought the community together, so that was a lot of fun. We do campaigns and storytelling with them, which are similar to what we will do with you. After all of the digging deep with the communications team, we figure we have a main objective of establishing community support for these service enhancements and 3 strategies to do that. Number 1 is to build confidence through elevated creative. Number 2, to create emotional connections through stories of real people. And number 3, to make the work relevant through engagement. So elevated creative, stories, and engagement. So that elevated creative, what we have done is look at what you already have as your brand standards and picked up some parts that bring more vibrancy, more color, more energy to what is there but isn't often used yet right now. So the components of the campaign are these colors. These colors are actually in your brand standards right now, but not really used all that often. And then the theme of connections. This is your mission, and so you know it well, creating community connections. But the thread, which we're calling the connections thread, is a visual representation of bringing people together and moving them forward together. The photography will have a specific direction to show real people authentically in a way that makes them stand out from their background and allows them to sort of pull apart from the background. We're using stock images right now. We'll get to use actual images when we create them with you. And we also have the ability to use this campaign creative, if you see that on the right, without imagery. So this could be, for these open houses or things like that, where it still has relevance. For the real stories, so that's step 2, we want to talk about the people who make the buses go and the people who use them. And you're part of that, so you see yourselves on the list. We want, in this first round, to get a bus operator, a board member, of course, that uses the service and has a good story to tell, business owner, community leader, student, senior, worker, and a person with a disability. That will be our first phase that'll take us through much of this year to capture that. And we'll place those stories on the website, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and email. And I'll talk for a minute about formats, because I heard it come up at the last meeting. So we will format each of these according to the communication channel and the way that it fits it. So we'll have a longer form video that can go on YouTube and the website. Let's say that's about 2 minutes. For Instagram, those will be vertical videos, not the horizontal format, so they fit into that Reels sort of format that best accommodates Instagram. For Facebook, they will be shorter. There'll be a Reels version. We may also do a horizontal version. Facebook, we may do carousel photos, so we're using photography to, you can swipe through and get the story through photos. So we'll use these stories in a lot of different ways that we can piece out, or the team can piece out through social media and in a variety of ways. And also it will build the photo library for the team to be able to use in all kinds of materials. You can never have too many good photos, at least in my world. And then that last step of engagement, you've heard about the open houses. I completely agree. I think we both agree, and we all agree, that presentations are important too, so that is part of the engagement process. And then you also heard about a mechanism to collect feedback. I think that's my last slide. So I would love to have any discussion or answer any questions that you have.
Director Laura Midkiff. I feel like I see a question.
I know Sarah has a question.
I know.
Go ahead.
Letting other people go first.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's okay.
No, please. Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I get to dictate who goes first.
Oh, yeah.
Do it now.
Director Navarro, any questions?
Just a comment. I mean, that's awesome that you can capture all of that and be able to tell a story through a picture. They say that a lot of times when we're communicating with others, I was deployed overseas for a while, and they would tell us that when we're communicating with our families, that it's a lot more powerful when you do it through like video chat. You lose some of that message when you write a letter.
Yeah.
And then you gain some of that when you have a video. And then you gain it even more when you're in person and they can see your body movements and things like that. So I appreciate how you can capture all of that and be able to share that story with the community. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Director Davidson?
I appreciate that you coming in new to this project and new to the organization, that you were able to capture what I think is the essence of our mission, which, I mean, obviously the words of the mission, but I particularly like our mission, the idea of creation, the connection in the community. Well, I'm just rephrasing the 3 words in the mission, but the thread is both visually and perhaps metaphysically appealing. I'm quite taken with it, so thank you for that.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Director Duncan?
I'm ready.
I'm not here to grill people. Oh my goodness.
I think, was it you last time that said I better be ready for questions?
I mean,
It was me just reiterating.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate this presentation. I know that we're working with 2 different groups, so please correct me if I ask a question that is not under your purview,
Sure.
because that could happen. So I really love that you guys are going to lead with stories and emotions, because that's how people make decisions. We like to bombard them with facts all the time, and we do have some really cool facts here, but I agree that emotions and stories are the way to go. It's largely how I got roped into transit. Thank you very much. I had some questions specifically about you talking about your social media strategy. I know it's a presently evolving space in this, like, within the last even 2 weeks. So I know that there's a lot of hurdles and things that I'm sure you guys are keeping a close eye on to try to navigate as people shift around with the uncertainty of that space right now. 2 platforms in particular that I've asked about that I'd love to hear about, and I'm going to guess that your services are somewhat, you pay per platform for most social media services, so I don't know if that's the way that you guys work. So I understand if this isn't part of our package. I know that we have a lot of conversations about transit happening on Reddit, and I know that we have a very different demographic on TikTok than what is on Instagram and Reels. So I just was hoping we could talk about that a little bit.
TikTok in particular, you need to advise me, and we have been steered away from any government agency that we work with because of the controversies and whatever that are happening. So that's just, although we'd love to use it because it reaches a target demographic, we haven't been able for that group of people that we work with. For Reddit, I agree with you. I think that is a PR strategy that we haven't really talked about too much yet, and I'm not sure to what degree Cherriots and communication staff are already doing it. It doesn't fall within like our purview of creative services, but I agree that conversations happen there.
Okay, that's wonderful. I'm not super clear on the government agencies and TikTok. I do know that multiple representatives are on there and have official pages on there, so there's got to be some way to do it. And if we could, that would be wonderful, since it is a very different audience. I know we also have audiences on Blue Sky and Nextdoor, but I appreciate that they're significantly smaller. My next question is, in the work that you guys are going to be doing with your comprehensive strategy, does that include like comments engagement, diving into groups on Facebook? How nitty-gritty are you guys going to get for us?
Not yet are we doing that, and that might be in just a future phase. I would consider Reddit in a future phase as well as far as our engagement. And I just can't, maybe it's a better question for Patricia to answer on what's going on right now, or maybe you already know.
I think Dana's spot on, is that I would say that that's probably another phase that we're going into. It's something that we're monitoring right now. Personally, the marketing team, we're all very interested in Reddit, and we're all members of different groups, and so we're exploring it. And it's actually something that's come to light with community engagement as a marketing means. And I did present to Director Holmstrom and the CAC in regard to that creating communities is sort of the frontier, the new frontier of marketing. And so Reddit falls right in there.
Awesome. Since we're just talking about it, I know Reddit, Facebook groups, and then I normally don't get on Nextdoor, but I have been recently, and they are talking about community stuff, so that as well. I think that kind of covers the work that you guys will specifically be doing. I'm really excited to see what you guys put out. I'm excited to see what comes of the pages. I know that it's a lot more pay to play than things used to be. Is there a marketing budget for like paid ads included in the services?
Yes, and that's a big, I agree with you. These days, especially organic social media, it almost doesn't exist for businesses. It's been completely monetized. So if you want people to see even a post, it needs to have some money behind it. So yes.
Thank you. That's all I have for now. Don't worry, there'll be more in the future, guys.
Okay, I'll be ready. Anything else?
Director Holmstrom?
I suppose I'll just echo my colleagues on either side of me here. I like the taste of what you've given us in terms of the creative and bringing a little bit more color into it. I was just looking at, like, I guess we're kind of blue and gray here mostly, aren't we? A little bit, and that I like blue and gray color. But so I'm okay with it. But I like that we're going to bring a little color into it. And what everything Director Davidson said about that, I think resonates with me as well. So I appreciate that. I'm looking forward to that. And also just listening to Director Duncan, I think globally or within our entire country, we're dealing with a really more fragmented media and social media landscape, and that's certainly the case in our community as well, right?
Yes.
And the city, I know folks at the city council have been dealing with the same issue, like how do we get our message out?
Yes.
And in a situation where the paper is not what it used to be, right?
Right.
And that's the same true, I'm sure, with Register Guard and everywhere else too, right? Paper's not what
Absolutely.
it used to be. Just local media in general, much more fragmented, people on all the kinds of different channels. And so I like this approach. I like everything Director Duncan had to say, and just trying to make sure that we're looking at everything, because over the last few years, our board has heard a really great story about everything that we're doing. And we had another great chapter in that story earlier today when we talked about, all the great numbers that we're getting. And the board can hear all these great numbers and we can keep patting ourselves on the back, but if everyone else in the community doesn't hear that story, then it's not gonna do us any good. And so I'm really looking forward to this. It's something I've been looking forward to. I appreciate all your work on this, and of course the team at the district, of course, doing just a great job altogether. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I will just to comment on that, if I can. What you're saying is exactly what we've been trying to accomplish, in that it's not blues and gray. It's not just blues and grays and numbers, if you will, right? There are real people and real stories, and what was said here about emotion and heart. I mean, you have to have the numbers, you have to have the fiscal responsibility, right? And I'm telling you, it might be hard for you to believe because I think you've only seen such high numbers here for that community value, but it is really unusual. The presenter who said your average is so much higher than national and otherwise, it is really true. I mean, your community really does value your service. So we're walking in with that foundation. So now we just need to give people a visual and a heart connection to those numbers and the actual sentiment that they seem to already have.
Director Davidson?
Thank you. You've identified a couple assets. Most recently, you mentioned, a high community value sentiment. You've talked about this what I'll call a new phase of communication strategy. We're obviously looking at a particular message that we want to communicate in a certain environment. From my, I'm not a communication professional. From my untrained eyes, this seems like a challenging task to accomplish that would be time consuming. Could you give me a sense of timelines? Like, you're coming in with fresh eyes based on the assets and challenges that you're seeing here. Ballpark, we're looking at 3 months, 17 months. You'll be dead by the time we're done, Ian. What are we looking at?
I hope we'll be dead by the time you finish your contract with us. No, I'm just kidding. But I think we're moving along. It depends on what timeline you're talking about, because the guidelines that we referred to in the creative, we're just waiting to present this, and then we're ready to almost deliver them so the team here can start using some of those assets. The open houses will have some of this creative in it. We've scheduled a scouting trip for our video and photo team to come and see things and assess. We're getting ideas and lining up people for the stories. So, I mean, we're moving forward. I would say this whole year, we're going to be cranking out different stories and different creative that you're going to see almost right away.
A quick follow-up. How quickly, so once you have these assets and then you start releasing the assets or the collateral, or I'm clearly not using the terms.
No, you're doing good.
Once you start releasing them to the community, how quickly do you think that there's some penetration to the community and a perception change? I guess that's my question around timeline.
That's a harder question. I think, I mean, if I'm going to be realistic, I think it's going to take the better part of the year to penetrate and have people say, oh, I recognize that's now Cherriots. And to have an emotional, impact to say, oh, I recognize that person. Or in these stories, we want people to either see literally themselves, like, I'm like that person, I take the bus, or I can take the bus, or we want to have them see what represents their values. So instead of necessarily thinking of, I fill out the survey or I see the bus go by, to have them change to see a face and colors, I think it'll take a year.
Okay, before I get back to you, did we have any other questions over here? Director Laura Midkiff. See, I knew.
Thank you, President. Well, I don't know what to ask. Director Davison kind of stole my question. So thank you for being here. The design is very attractive. It's very nice. I'm going to try to ask a question. I know nothing about what you do. This is the area I know the least about. So obviously, I've been told there's value in online things, and I trust that to be true. I think one of the challenges that our peer in the area or the city has had is they had a really divided governing body. And the city has limits as to what staff can do to promote things like the thing that we're proposing to do. And so city staff can't do advocacy, they only can spend a certain amount of hours trying to create materials. Councilors did not engage very well on their campaigns. Maybe Ian would disagree with me on that, I'm not sure, but maybe some did and some didn't. But I think one of the benefits that we have is we have, how many of us are there? Are there 7 of us?
There's 7.
We have, Sadie's online. We have 7 people who are really eager to do the work of doing the sort of storytelling that I hear you describing. And so help me understand, in addition to online things, what in-person things that we can do. Because I think one of the things that was a problem for the city was in their campaign rollout, it was almost exclusively online, and almost all in-person things were like someone's living room or dinner with the mayor, or people knocking on things. And I feel like there's so much more potential here, because while we're not doing what the city was trying to do, what we're doing rhymes of that, and the appetite for those sort of things, despite all of the positive things that we hear about from the community, the appetite for that change is very, very low. And so help me understand how you marry or couple the in-person with the online. Is that a fair question? Did I do a good job? Okay.
I think the presentations are a big part of that. I think going to where people are in the Chamber of Commerce and the Latino business and the Rotaries and all of those are really important. The people that come to your open house are very important as well, and not everybody's going to come. So there has to just be more effort to go out to them. And then I don't know that we've talked about this, but I'm just going to give you my opinion that if you are interested in that kind of storytelling and kind of advocacy just in of yourselves and your spheres of influence, there's nothing better. And we can work together to give you talking points or to help you tell those stories just when you're having dinner and when you're out with your friends, or you're talking to your business colleagues or things like that. So we're all kind of speaking from the same script, if you will.
Okay, thank you very much.
Director Navarro?
I was kind of curious if there's been any planning around how to capture culture. We're a very diverse community, as you saw kind of in the presentation previously tonight. There's a huge percentage of our riders that speak Spanish that are that come from that community, and so I wonder, like, what's your capacity to be able to capture that, and not just like the Spanish community and Latino culture, but also like people who are utilizing the bus to go to Temple, who are coming back from a sport that's culturally based. Like, do you have a plan for capturing that and telling that story in the community?
I think the hardest part, which is great, is that we have too many ideas than we can accomplish in 1 year, but we are trying to focus that through the lens of diversity and trying to get a variety of types of people, ages, stages in life, religions, origins, all the different kinds, and we will be working with the team to identify who those people are. But I think diversity is also inherent in the colors of the thread, if you will, sort of a visual representation of the community coming together and all different kinds of people coming together. So as much as possible, it would be our desire to authentically represent your community.
Awesome, thank you.
Director Duncan? Oh, Director Carney, thank you.
Thank you, President Hinojosa-Pressy. And this may have been answered in one of your previous slides. I'm sorry, it's not in front of me right now. I just have my packet materials. But two groups that come to mind, and one I'm almost positive you addressed, and that's our student riders.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if there is a way to engage them. Maybe we kind of consider them to be a captive audience because a lot of them don't have the ability or means to drive on their own. But I just think about what a huge group of riders we have attracted with the free youth pass over the last couple of years. And how powerful that has been, I think, both in our community and their community, and just in general, I think, as a message, providing that autonomy and freedom. And then another group that I think about, and I would love to hear, other board members' feedback on it, but I'm just throwing it out here for consideration. One thing that really defines the city of Salem is that we are the state capital, and the Capitol buildings and the Enterprise are very, very close to downtown. And I know when we used to come to office, our offices in person, there was a stronger kind of like park and ride relationship with transit, and some of that has fallen by the wayside. I don't know that it's part of our service improvement package that we will be offering. But I just wonder about that huge group of people. But it's a little bit of a tough relationship too, I think, because they aren't generally local. I mean, I am, but I ride my bike there every day. But they're so close. They're such close neighbors. Those were two groups that I thought about that I just wanted to bring up for consideration. But great art, super inspiring. I'm very, very excited. Thank you for the presentation and for sharing your talent with the transit agency.
Thank you for that. I will say students are definitely on the list. I like your idea of bringing in the Capitol and the legislators. And what are your opinions? What do you think about that?
They're almost like a vacation community. You know what I mean? They come and go. Are they really invested or are they not? Like, I grew up in a town that was very seasonal that way. And it was hard. I mean, they were a significant part of the economic base that we relied on as a community, but they were them, right? And I don't know if there's a way that we kind of broaden and enhance our community to include that population through this. And maybe that's too big an ask for a transit campaign.
Thank you. I think Director Holmstrom has an answer there.
Well, I don't have an answer or not, but I've been a state employee for almost 18 years now in living in Salem, and it's changed a lot just the culture and how things work and the level of activity at that state Capitol Mall campus for state employees, just since COVID has really been the big one. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's clearly a big group of employees. It's a very large employer in our community still, for sure. But the character of that has changed a lot. And I don't, DAS used to have the numbers about where people came from, but I haven't seen that since COVID, and I imagine it's changed a little bit. We've had a lot of turnover in our agency and change in our agency. I imagine other agencies are the same, just in terms of what people are doing and how often they come in. But it's still big. It's still huge. I think it's an important demographic to get at. But yeah, that's good. Big questions there to answer for sure. Yeah.
Director Duncan?
See if it'll let me talk. Okay. Before we finish up, just real quick, I just want to say a couple things on messaging. You mentioned wanting to say about all of the cool things we saw in our survey, and I totally agree. I don't want it to accidentally come off condescending. I feel like there are pieces of the presidential campaign that kind of taught us that lesson, that they didn't land well when people talked about their success. And I worry about that happening with us, as I want to make sure we're able to talk about our success in a way that is humble and thankful to the community and continues to talk about the things we're going to do in the future. Because although I know people say good things about our service, there's a lot of people that do not view our service favorably. And I feel that a lot of those people are often not captured in surveys, but would be happy to have a loud megaphone on a social media site.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to be cautious about that a little bit. And then just kind of for the board, mostly for Ian, kind of coming on your questions about timeline, I wanted to just say that, like, I think there will be a moment where we're experiencing a different flavor than we have been with all of these like glowing surveys and things, because by entering these spaces that we largely haven't been, we will encounter people and bring Cherriots to the front of mind to people that we're not normally front of mind and may not have as many nice things to say about us. And there will be some time where we need to debunk community misconceptions. One of the things that I regularly see is people not having an understanding of what the city budget covers and thinking that it covers more of our services than it does, or the way that the board is comprised and where, the funding for things go. And, a lot of, why don't we pay for potholes and things like that. So I think that there will be a period of time where things maybe feel like this is not going the direction we want to. And I just want to kind of like make sure that the board understands that by entering these spaces, it is our opportunity to speak to the public, but also by inviting more people in, that invites in lots of opinions and lots of thoughts. And so as we go on this journey that will, I'm sure, take more than a year, I just want to make sure that people kind of are ready for that, because I think you did a good job and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you have. And I don't want those conversations that are going to be hard to make people feel dissuaded along the process. So
Appreciate that.
Okay. I don't know if I missed it in either of the presentations that we just had, but are these materials going to be like bilingual or just available in multiple languages?
Yes.
Okay. And what languages are we planning on targeting?
Right now, we're going to be doing Spanish for the open houses just because we have such a quick timeline. But we are looking at other languages for the going forward with the other enhancements that we're going to be focused on. So initially, it will just be Spanish, as we've been doing in the past, but we are looking at other languages because we have more time going forward.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? I think that's everything. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so that brings us to our general manager's report.
Great, thank you. I do have a couple items I'd like to update on. So earlier you heard the legislative update, but just a few other things as it relates to the state legislative session. So Dale mentioned it, the key committee for us is the Joint Committee on Transportation. They have published their meeting schedule, so they meet twice a week, Tuesdays from 5 to 6:30 and Fridays from 1 to 2:30 p.m. So at a minimum, CFM will be staffing those meetings and watching, and from time to time I will be there as well, depending on the agenda items there. And in addition to that, the Oregon Transit Association holds a weekly meeting of its advocacy team that I'll be participating in. And for all of you, as a save the date, April 1st is our transit day at the Capitol. I'm still working on the details there, but if schedules allow, it'd be great to have you there participating in that.
Okay.
I do want to talk a little bit about earlier tonight, the survey results, which are great results. And, you know, a survey is a point in time, and it can mean a lot of things. I just want to remind everyone that this was our 4th wave of surveys. ETC has done it twice, and TransPro has done 2 surveys. And I think the important thing to take away is the numbers and the results are consistent through all 4 waves. It's not a one-time, you know, and you stop. I mean, the importance of the continuity of the results, I think, is more important than the one survey in and of itself. And it really just goes to the quality of the people we have here at Cherriots, who do a great job every day. You know, the frontline workers, the drivers, the maintenance folks, the customer service folks, and all the staff doing their role every day together makes us achieve our mission. While the numbers are good, for me, the most important thing is seeing that continuity of results and the consistency of the work that has gone on. An example of that happened yesterday when we had an adverse incident. As soon as word got out, you know, people dropped what they were doing. Our operations folks, our security folks, our risk folks, and other staff got to the scene, partnered with the police department during the investigation. People followed up with the operator, getting information out to share what we can, but also being sensitive to the impacts of what happened. And you know, I've talked about it before, and I talk about it, especially in service, about the Cherriots way. And you know, when times of adversity comes, you really get to see how an organization works. And I was real proud to watch people just do what needed to be done to make sure things happened. And so that's a great example of that. And I think I'll end my comments with that note.
Thank you very much. Who would like to follow up our general manager first? I think I'm going to go online. Director Carney?
Thank you, President and host Pressy. Let's see. First, I just do want to say that my thoughts are with the family of Joseph Chandler, and I appreciate all of the straightforward and quick communication by leadership, and Alan specifically keeping us informed on that. That's difficult news for the community and difficult news for the board. And I'm sorry I'm not there in person this evening. And just circling back quickly to our community service survey and our community values survey. I know that some of my colleagues said this, but it's really a testament to every single employee at Cherriots, and a huge kudos to our leadership team. It's hard to find places to improve with a survey like that. So I'm really looking forward to some of this upcoming work in the community to help us figure that out. Let's see, personally, the SCATS Policy Committee meets next Tuesday on the 28th. We will be discussing the evaluation criteria for discretionary funding at that meeting, and we'll also be reviewing an outline of tasks and the schedule, the draft Unified Planning Work Program at that meeting, and I will be happy to report back next month. And that's all I have to report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Davidson?
Thank you, President Enos Pressy. I'd also like to express my condolences to Joseph Chandler's family. I'd like to just to say that I, at this time, would like to mourn with those who are mourning. I do not know all of the particulars of what occurred, so I cannot and will not comment on the circumstances of what occurred yesterday. But I would like to speak about some generalities about traffic fatalities in our region. According to some data that's now out of date, but from 2017 to 2021, using some National Highway Traffic Safety Administration data, comparing Salem to different cities, both in Oregon and nationwide, Salem has incredibly high fatality rates. We had the second highest fatality rate by population out of 8 Oregon cities examined by SCATS, which is our metropolitan planning organization. And we had the third highest of all of 15 different cities that SCATS compared Salem to. Now, among those cities, so this is on a per capita basis, so per 100,000 residents, so size of city does not matter. Salem sees more traffic fatalities than Philadelphia, Boston, San Francisco, and New York. And so when we think about safety and community safety, many people has certain perceptions about safety in those communities. On our streets, at least in the city of Salem, unfortunately, if you are walking, biking, or yes, even in a car, you are more likely to die than if you are in one of those 4 major United States cities. This last year, we saw a historic high in the number of fatalities on City of Salem streets. So in 2024, we saw 22 traffic fatalities. The prior year, there were only 13, and that was a very, very high year. Now, unless you think I'm cherry picking, over the last 4 years, we've seen a continuing trend of greater traffic fatalities. In the US, we see double the number of traffic fatalities than Canada, unless you think that the 49th parallel is some magical line that doubles traffic fatalities. It's not. Our culture is largely the same. Our vehicles are largely the same. The big difference is how we design our roads. That is ultimately a policy choice. I'm encouraged by many of the policy choices that the recent city council has made at the city of Salem. They have secured funding to stand up a Vision Zero rapid response group, where hopefully, unfortunately, at a future traffic fatality, they will be able to do a after the fact analysis of what occurred and perhaps create some interventions that might prevent a future fatality on our roads. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And as we adopted earlier today in our priorities and principles, this is something that we at Cherriots care deeply about, because the moment somebody steps off or gets off of one of our buses, they become a vulnerable road user, because they are now walking or rolling off of our buses. So those are just a few of my thoughts today. Now, turning my attention to the reports that I need to make to you all. So earlier this week, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments Legislative Committee met this Wednesday at 7 a.m. And you may recall last month I talked about how there was discussion about removing property tax reform and regional rail from the regional priorities of the legislative agenda. And while it's not a fait accompli, those are likely to be removed according to the discussion of Wednesday's committee meeting, because there is and excuse the wordplay here, but there is a consensus to operate under consensus at the committee, which some may describe as everybody gets a veto. And so those two items are being removed from the legislative agenda, which had previously been placed on there for 2 years prior and had been voted on unanimously by the full board. Now, I then articulated our previously our approved and once again restated position as formalized in our priorities and principles document, which is to prioritize maintaining existing road infrastructure as opposed to building out new road infrastructure, which resulted in some changes to the regional priorities there. There was some robust discussion as a result of that. So I wanted to make the board aware of that. There may be some additional robust discussion as a result of that. Happy to have some additional conversations with you all about that. But this is something that will continue to be discussed both at the legislative committee and then ultimately at the full board. This, I imagine, will have impacts, or maybe not impacts is the right word, but will be a point of discussion at both MWAC and SCATS. So for those representatives, I'm happy to discuss with you all one-on-one. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Director Holmstrom?
Thank you, President Hinojosa Pressy. I'd also like to express my my sympathies to the family of the gentleman that passed away yesterday. And I echo a lot of Director Davidson's sentiments and concerns and dismay about the state of our unsafe transportation system, where all of us, all of our families have to exist every day. So with that being said, I don't have any additional updates to provide for the board this week. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Duncan?
I don't have much of an update. I don't have much of an update this time. Things have been postponed or didn't happen in January, etc. My thoughts also go out to the family of Joseph Chandler. I don't think there's much to say that hasn't already been said. On a separate note, I think it's difficult to move forward without acknowledging that this was a really crazy week for a lot of people. Cherriots is about connecting the community, and safety hasn't always been one of our highest priorities. And that will continue. I want to acknowledge that there's a lot of people that found it difficult to work this week and pretend like things were normal, because things don't feel normal for a lot of people. And there's a lot of people that things felt totally normal. And for those of us that felt like it wasn't normal, that was almost weirder, because we felt like we were on an island. And so I just want to say that from at least this board member, I acknowledge that it was not normal for many of us, and it may not be for a while in the future. And I, as a board member, I'm still committed to this community and creating connections with every community member. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Navarro?
Yeah, thank you. I don't know that I can share anything that hasn't already been shared about expressing our condolences to the family of Joseph Chandler. That was very difficult to hear. It was very difficult to experience, because that's what the topic of discussion was for the majority of that day, everywhere that I went. So I just want to express my condolences, and Yeah, I don't know what else to say. To my report, STIFAC did not meet this month, so I have nothing to report.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Lara Midkiff.
Thank you. Similarly, wanted to communicate how profound the loss of life is to communities and families. So our condolences, of course, as my colleague has already expressed, go out to Mr. Chandler's family. Also feeling a lot for our transit operator who must be going through what can only be described as an extraordinary situation right now, and thoughts go out to him. Ian put it very well. The nature of this crisis in Salem, and as a wheelchair user, especially too, I think about that for road crossings and folks with disabilities is particularly acute. I think I also would just want to comment as well that in addition to being terrible and tragic, this is also exceptionally rare. And so I think that is a testament to this agency's commitment to safety and to serving the community as well. So thank you for all of your service and continued service in doing your part in making the streets of Salem safe and accessible to as many people as possible. So thank you for that. Pivoting, I was traveling out of state for almost all of January, so I haven't been in Oregon, but would like to in advance thank Cherriots for hosting a point in time count session on Monday, which helps the Mid-Willamette Valley Homeless Alliance perform their annual count of folks experiencing houselessness. And I think the session is on Monday from 1 to 4:30 in the Cherriots lobby, which asks folks who are experiencing both shelter and unsheltered houselessness where they slept on the night of 22nd of January. And so this is of great importance to local governments and decision makers in serving one of our most at-risk and vulnerable populations in the Mid-Valley. So thank you for Cherriots for hosting that on Monday.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for participating this evening. It is now 8:17 and I will call this meeting adjourned.